Hey everyone, tonight we begin with something deceptively simple, yet brimming with hidden complexity. The ancient craft of turning rice stalks, what most call agricultural waste, into sturdy, everyday fabrics. It was necessity, ingenuity, and community labour all intertwined along the Mekong's quieter branches. Before we dive in, take a moment to like and subscribe if you genuinely enjoy uncovering these forgotten chapters of history. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us under the same sky. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's drift into tonight's journey together. Imagine twilight on a broad flooded plain, the rhythmic chorus of cicadas, wooden poles marking rice paddies half submerged, and villagers gathering stalks that once bore the staple grain of their lives. Here in small riverside settlements, communities discovered that the coarse outer layers of rice plants, if stripped, soaked, and spun, yielded cords and cloth. It was not silk's smooth glamour, nor cotton's softness, but a humble textile born of survival, resourcefulness, and quiet artistry. Section 1. Origins of Khmer Rice Weaving. You're standing on a narrow earthen path that threads between emerald rice paddies gently waving in the dusk breeze. Each stalk you see was once heavy with grains of nourishment. Now, after harvest, those very stalks become the raw material for a surprising craft. In this section, you'll trace how early Khmer villagers, constrained by limited resources and driven by communal needs, transformed agricultural detritus into functional fabrics, shaping daily life, local economies, and cultural exchange along the Mekong's winding arms, the ecology of opportunity. In the lower Mekong basin, monsoon rains flood the plains from June through October, leaving behind vast expanses of fertile silt and standing water. By December, when the fields drain and golden rice panicles are harvested, enormous volumes of rice stalks, phnom in Khmer, lie cut and drying in the sun. Rather than burn or leave these fibrous residues to rot, villagers observed that the outer rind, or husk sheath, held potential. The key lay in the stalk's structure, a network of strong cellulose fibres bound by lignin. Early experiments, likely born of children's idle play, revealed that soaking stalk samples in slow-moving side channels softened the lignin, allowing fibres to separate. Over weeks, villagers refined soaking times to coincide with seasonal water temperatures. Cooler January currents doubled the time needed, while March's warm shallows halved it. By mid-14th century CE, this trial and error had coalesced into a rudimentary protocol. Gather stalks immediately post-harvest, bundle them and sink in gentle currents for 5 to 7 days, then pound them on submerged stones with wooden mallets. This pounding, often a communal affair, families taking turns, wearied the toughest bindings, yielding pliable fibre strips. 2. From stripping to spinning, once liberated, the fibres required cleaning. Villagers built shallow washing troughs, stone-lined basins fed by continuous stream flow, where women and children gently agitated fibres, dislodging residual sediments and starch. The resulting pale, water-clear runoff signified readiness for spinning. Enter the drop spindle, a simple wooden shaft topped by a clay or stone whorl. Spindles were often carved from local hardwoods, their whorls inscribed with clan marks or simple geometric motifs. Spinning sessions gathered around hearth fires at dusk. One spinner, often an elder, demonstrated hand motions, drafting a small tuft of fibre between forefinger and thumb while giving the whorl a gentle twist, allowing gravity to pull the spindle down and tension the emerging single. Spinners developed a shared vocabulary: watt for the initial twist, saw for drafting length, and chom for the final wind onto the shaft. Apprentices, children as young as 8, learned these terms, practicing with shorter fibres until their calloused fingers could manage full stalk lengths. Each spindle could yield 5 to 6 metres of single in an evening, which then sat overnight under drying mats to set twist. 3. Plying and weaving on ground looms. Morning brought next steps. Singles of rice fibre, surprisingly strong yet slightly brittle, were grouped in pairs or threes for plying. 2 spindles would spin together, fope, rotating clockwise for one spin, then plying counterclockwise to lock the fibres. This balanced tension produced yarns of uniform thickness, often between 2-3 mm in diameter. Weaving took place on simple ground looms. 2 horizontal bamboo poles anchored between posts, tightened with rope lashings. Warp threads were tied early at consistent intervals, usually no more than 1 cm apart, creating a narrow weaving width of 30-40 cm. Women sat cross-legged, feet anchoring the lower beam, while rhythmically passing weft threads with their fingers. Patterns remained utilitarian, plain tabby or simple twill, but occasional diamonds or water reed motifs emerged, echoing riverbank vegetation. Finished strips, once washed in scented river water, were sewn end to end using the same rice fibre yarn to create mats strong enough to support household activities, sleeping platforms, food preparation mats, and even temporary wall screens during festival days. 4. Socio-economic ripple effects. Though coarse and less prestigious than silk or cotton, rice fibre textiles held immense local value. In lean years, villagers traded surplus mats and belts to river traders for dried fish or seed rice, ensuring community food security. Traders bound for Angkor, capital at the time, often carried small loads of carefully rolled rice fibre mats, noting in their logs how temple priests used them to insulate stone bench. During winter months. As early as the 15th century, Khmer tributary villages along tributaries such as the Tonlé Sap distributaries sent mats as in-kind tax offerings. Temple inscriptions carved into laterite stone mention sang mats, monastery mats, provided by specific villages, suggesting institutional demand and organised production quotas. Cultural exchange and decline. Through river networks, rice fibre weaving spread to Shan and Lao communities, who adapted the technique to local reeds. Yet with increasing European contacts in the 17th century, imported cotton cloth and later machine-made textiles undercut local mats. Over time, rice fibre weaving receded, preserved mostly by elderly weavers in remote hamlets. Unresolved thought. As you picture fading light on endless mats drying by the riverbank, consider this. How did a community-born solution, transforming humble rice stalks into durable fabric, come to echo along distant tributaries, only to almost vanish under the tide of new cloths and global trade? Cultivating craft, community, trade networks, and the looms beyond. Last time, you walked the rice stalk fields at dusk, learned how families soaked and pounded stalks by moonlit water, spun fibres on simple drop spindles, and wove narrow strips into mats that underpinned daily life. Now, we'll journey beyond the delta's edge, into riverside villages, coastal markets, and inland temples, to see how rice fibre weaving became a web of communal identity, trade relationships, and adaptive innovation. Through the eyes of individual artisans, itinerant traders, and regional administrators, you'll discover how a humble craft wove communities together, and how its slow unravelling foreshadowed larger shifts in Southeast Asia's economy and ecology. Village workshops and domestic economies. Household production as collective endeavour, in riverine settlements like Sray. Snam and Chi Krang, weaving wasn't a solitary endeavour but a household and often a multi-household ritual. At harvest's end, families organised weave weeks, communal gatherings in raised bamboo, stilt holes, role allocation, field gatherers. Young men and boys combed paddies for the longest, straightest stalks, soakers and pounding teams. Women and elders managed soaking vats by the river shore, rotating stalk bundles to ensure even softening. Spinning circles. As night fell, groups sat around smoky hearths, spindles clattering in unison, elders teaching apprentices the delicate draft and twist. Weaving guilds. Though informal, experienced weavers, Phnom Sray, led ground loom setups, adjusting warp spacing for specific mat widths. Mutual support networks. Extended families pooled labour when a member was ill or fields flooded. In exchange, the beneficiary family hosted feasts of grilled fish and sticky rice. Subtle social contracts preserving resilience across seasons. Village workshops evolve. By the late 16th century, some villages formed semi-specialised workshops. Thatched weave halls, simple open-air structures with raised wooden platforms, allowing simultaneous spinning and weaving under a single roof. Tool sharing. Communal possession of high-quality bamboo spindles and reed combs, expensive to craft, ensured equitable access. Local masters. A few villagers, recognised for exceptional skill, took small stipends in kind, extra mats or rice, to teach neighbours, establishing hereditary artisan families within otherwise agrarian communities. 2. River trade and market integration. Mekong waterways as arteries of exchange. The Mekong and its tributaries functioned like roads but wider, swelling with seasonal trade. Floating market patterns. During high water, August-November, longboats laden with woven mats drifted from tributary villages downstream to larger river ports, Paksan, Kratie, and ultimately Longvek or Phnom Penh. Mats tied in bundles, lashed with rice fibre twine, formed bulging cargo that dangled over boat sides, dripping fruit. Ishwater residue, signalling origin villages, market days and seasonal timing. Lower basin markets synchronized with post-harvest periods. Merchants timed flotillas to coincide with Trung-Thu, Mid-Autumn Festival, in China, where matte textures sold as floor coverings for moonlit gatherings fetched premium prices. Exchange rates, mats per basket of fish, or mats per tael of silver, were negotiated by river village chiefs, translating fibre work into tangible community wealth. B. Inter-regional networks. Rice fibre mats also travelled overland, caravanserai. Stops. On routes linking Angkor to Ayutthaya, courier trains carried compact rolls of mats as beddings for envoys, their use documented in 17th century Thai royal archives. Diplomatic tributes. Khmer kings occasionally sent mats as lesser tributes to Ming court envoys, recorded in palace girders as humble symbols of provincial craft, broadening the craft's prestige beyond subsistence. 3. Institutional support and regulation. A. Temple and royal patronage. Temples and royal courts acted as patron-sanctioned hubs. Monastery workshops. Large Buddhist monasteries along the Tonlé Sap lake, Angkor Bore, Preah Khan, commissioned mats for assembly halls. Monks taught weaving techniques, preserving knowledge within monastic codes. Royal workshops at Angkor. Tom's outskirts, Phnom Kandel housed a royal weaver corps producing mats for palace pavilions and ceremonial use. These weavers, a mix of conscripted artisans and specialised guild members, worked in stone-walled, thatch-roofed halls, their mats stamped with a lotus leaf seal in blue indigo dye. B. Taxation and guild oversight. The Khmer state levied modest in-kind taxes on mats. Waqf style, endowments, local Mandarin decrees required villagers to supply a fixed mat quota to provincial granaries, recorded in palm leaf tax registers. Standardisation edicts, late 17th. 8th century reforms under King Tomorichia III stipulated minimum mat dimensions, 1.5 by 2 metres, and a minimum thread count, ensuring some uniformity and preventing substandard surpluses. I for adaptation and innovation. A. Silk-rice hybrid textiles. Some workshops experimented blending silk warps with rice fibre wefts. Technique. Silk provided tensile strength. Rice fibre added body and rustic texture. Woven on larger looms, these mats fetched higher market prices but required imported silk threads, often Chinese or island woven, linking rice weaving villages to broader trade webs. Cultural significance. Hybrid mats featured in wedding dowries, seen as symbols of interregional cooperation, root fibres from one's homeland, silk threads from distant courts. B. Mechanisation pressures. By the 18th century, small treadle looms, introduced via Vietnamese innovations, entered some villages. Hybrid looms. Single weaver pedals freed hands to manage multiple weft threads, speeding production by 20 to 30%. Social tensions. Traditionalists decried mechanisation as weakening fibre quality. Younger weavers embraced speed, setting early fault lines in craft identity. V. Decline along the tributaries. Despite diversification, rice fibre weaving faced mounting challenges. Increasing cotton imports, European traders brought low-cost cotton cloth to Phnom Penh by the 19th century, saturating markets and undercutting mat value. Ecological disruptions. French colonial irrigation projects altered flood timings, reducing natural soaking currents essential for fibre processing. Villagers struggled to adapt, often reverting to burning stalks. Labour migration. Young labourers left weaving for cash wages in rice mills around Siem Reap, starving workshops of apprentices and eroding communal labour bonds. 6. Reflections on resilience. As river currents shift and village hearths grow cold, consider this unresolved point. In the face of ecological change, market upheaval and labour shifts, how did the interconnected systems of family workshops, river trade, institutional patrona, G and adaptive innovation sustain Khmer rice fibre weaving for centuries? And what lessons do these dynamics offer for preserving fragile craft traditions today? You explored the origins of Khmer rice fibre weaving, families pooling labour to strip, spin and weave rice stalks into mats, and saw how this craft wove communities together through household workshops, riverine trade networks, and temple and royal patronage. Now, in this final section of Story 1, we trace the climactic forces that unravelled centuries of rice fibre weaving, examine how survivors preserved memories and knowledge through oral tradition, and reflect on enduring lessons for sustaining vulnerable craft traditions in a changing world. I. The perfect storm, economic, ecological, and social upheavals. By the late 19th century, a confluence of external pressures began ripping rice fibre weaving from its communal roots. A. Global cotton flood and market displacement. The arrival of steamships and colonial trade networks brought machine-woven cotton cloth into Cambodian markets at unprecedented scale and low cost. By the 1880s, Price undercutting. Locally woven mats that once traded for a handful of fish or a bowl of rice found themselves valued far below imported cotton yardage. Machine looms in British India and French Indochina produced yard upon yard of soft cotton at prices traditional weavers could not match, despite rice fibre mats' superior durability in damp, riverine environments. Consumer preference shift. Even rural villagers, long accustomed to coarse rice fibre mats, began to covet the perceived comfort and status of cotton textiles, shifting household budgets toward cloth garments and away from mat production. Merchant incentives. River traders who once carried rice fibre mats downriver switched to transporting cotton bolts, earning higher commissions and accelerating the displacement. Oars. F. Indigenous crafts. B. Ecological disruptions from irrigation and logging. French colonial authorities in the early 20th century embarked on large-scale irrigation and forestry concessions, altered. Flood regimes. Colonial engineers redirected tributary flows to expand wet-season rice cultivation. These canal networks, while boosting paddy yields, drained slow side streams that weavers relied on for natural soaking basins. Without reliable soaking currents, families had to improvisationally boil fibres, an energy-intensive process feasible only in small batches. Deforestation and bark stripping shortages, logging for railway sleepers and plantation expansion, cut riparian forests. Key species, used to fashion beating mallets, spindles and reeds for reed combs, grew scarce. Villagers scavenged termite-hollowed branches or imported bamboo poles at inflated prices, further eroding profit margins. Soil degradation. Monocropped rice paddies depleted soils, leading to lower stalk fibre quality. Thinner stalks yielded weaker mats prone to fraying, undermining weavers' reputations for durable goods. C. Social transformation and labour exodus. As colonial economies offered cash wages in rice mills, rubber plantations, and port work. Youth migration. Teenagers and young adults left weaving villages for towns, seeking steady pay and the promises of modernity. The communal work rhythms that once passed down spinning and weaving skills dissolved amid urban anonymity. Gender role shifts. With men conscripted into colonial labour or recruited as police, women shouldered farm and domestic burdens, leaving little time for labour-intensive weaving. The few remaining weavers, often elderly, lacked assistance and gradually saw their looms gather dust. Intergenerational fracture. Children educated in new mission schools viewed rice fibre weaving as backward, preferring to read French primers rather than learn fibre carding or spinning. The cultural esteem that once honoured weavers eroded under colonial social hierarchies. 2. Cultural memory and oral preservation, even as active PR. Adduction waned. The stories and techniques of rice fibre weaving persisted in memory. A. Elder weavers as living archives in remote villages. Nightly story circles. Grandmothers and grandfathers convened small circles in thatched stilt houses, recounting the long-ago weave weeks when entire families gathered under woven mats hung as night curtains. These narratives emphasized communal resilience, figures of children spinning by hearth smoke, mothers singing lullabies through the clatter of spindles. Mnemonic songs and chants. To preserve procedural detail, elders crafted simple melody-based chants, one line per step. Soak by moon's last hour, pound till fibres tower, rinse in rivers gentle sour. These chirruping refrains encoded soaking times, mallet rhythms, and rinse water clearness checks. B. Rituals of remembrance. Communities developed small annual commemorations. Post-harvest weavers' feast. Even after looms went unused, villages held a harvest weavers' feast each December, laying out heirloom mats on raised platforms, offering sticky rice and fish to ancestral spirits, and reenacting spinning and weaving motions in ceremonial dances. Mat blessing ceremonies. Young couples received old mats as wedding gifts. During blessing rites, elders traced yam green patterns in rice fibre mats with turmeric paste, invoking fertility, durability, and communal continuity. Tributary. Modern revival efforts. In recent decades, cultural preservationists, NGOs, and artisan cooperatives have sought to rekindle rice fibre weaving. A. Ethnographic documentation and workshops, field research. Anthropologists recorded video footage of the last master weavers, now octogenarians, demonstrating spinning and weaving on ground looms. These recordings populate archives at the Royal University of Fine Arts in Phnom Penh. Hands-on workshops. Local NGOs organise weekend rice fibre revival. Workshops in village schools, youth practice stripping stalks, spinning pilot batches on simple drop spindles, and weaving narrow sample strips on tabletop looms. Though yield remains low, participants gain tactile understanding and spark intergenerational dialogue. B. Eco-enterprise and fair trade initiatives. Cooperative formation. In villages like PM Krasop, women's cooperatives formed to produce small batch mats and belts, marketed under fair trade labels, branded as Mekong Reed Weave. Premium prices support communal labour sharing and basic tool investment. Product diversification. Artisans adapt rice fibre techniques to modern products, lampshades, textured wall panels and small decorative baskets, blending traditional craft with urban design sensibilities. Tourism linkages. Eco-lodges along the Mekong offer Weave With Us packages, inviting guests to learn spinning and weaving, embedding craft revival into community-based tourism. T4. Lessons from a fragile tradition. The rise, decline and emergent revival of Khmer rice fibre weaving illuminate broader insights into sustaining vulnerable cultural practices. 1. Integrate ecology and economy. Lesson. Traditional crafts often depend on ecological conditions, water flows, plant species, soil health. Market interventions, irrigation canals, logging concessions can inadvertently sever craft ecologies. Application. Revival must include environmental restoration, protecting side-channel hydrology for natural soaking, replanting riparian forests for tool materials, ensuring the living resource base endures. Foster intergenerational transmission. Lesson. Crafts survive when young people see value and gain hands-on experience. Colonial schooling disrupted apprenticeship. Application. Embed craft education in local school curricula, pairing elders with students in living museum programs, incentivizing youth through stipends, recognition, and pathways to eco-enterprise. Leverage adaptive innovation. Lesson. Rice fibre weaving adapted through silk hybrids and early mechanization, yet strugg. Gled under unreflective modernization. Application. Encourage experimentations, blending rice fibre with modern sustainable fibres, designing new product lines that meet contemporary needs while honouring traditions. Cultivate cultural memory. Lesson. Storytelling, songs and ceremonies kept rice fibre weaving alive in memory, preparing fertile ground for revival. Application. Document intangible heritage, oral histories, mnemonic chants, ceremonial rites, and integrate them into community media, digital archives, and heritage festivals, strengthening collective identity. V. Final reflection. As you recall the tactile pull of a spindle's twist, the rhythmic tap of mallets on soaked stalks, and the soft hiss of water sluicing through fibres, consider this enduring question. In a world where ancient crafts face relentless pressures from global markets, ecological change, and social transformation, what strategies can we weave across communities, ecologies, and economies to ensure that the humble ingenuity of rice fibre weaving does not vanish, but rather continues? When kingdoms wove together, early silk and rice fibre trade, you've seen how humble rice stalks were transformed into sturdy mats in the delta's villages. Now imagine those same river routes bustling with fine silks and exotic dyes some centuries earlier, when the Sukhothai kingdom's weavers and the Khmer Empire's artisans exchanged woven treasures, spinning not only fibres but political alliances, religious ideas and cultural aesthetics. In this section, you'll trace how Sukhothai's flourishing silk industry met Khmer rice fibre traditions along the Chao Phraya Mekong corridors, forging an early textile network that underpinned diplomacy, commerce, and shared heritage. We begin in the mid-13th century, when a Sukhothai envoy first presented the Khmer court with shimmering silk, and follow the flux of Yi, I-Butte missions, merchant caravans, and artisan marriages that wove two kingdoms ever closer. I. Silk arrives in Angkor, a diplomatic gift. A. The Sukhothai embassies, in 1257 CE, during the reign of Jayavarman Vait, Rancha 1243 to 1295. Khmer chronicles record a remarkable embassy arriving from the newly ascendant Sukhothai kingdom to the northwest. Political context. Sukhothai, under King Ramkhamhaeng, R. 1279 to 1298, had consolidated power across the upper Chao Phraya basin. Their capital's elevation and inscriptions proclaim a new polity keen to assert both military prowess and cultural refinement. Jayavarman Vait faced internal religious shifts. Buddhist reforms challenged his Hindu-leaning court, and external pressures from Thai polities. A diplomatic overture could secure alliances or at least peaceful coexistence. The gift of woven radiance, the envoy arrived bearing bolts of spun silk, woven in tight tabby weaves with fine tension, their natural ivory threads shimmering under torchlight. Some panels were thread-dyed with gamboge yellow and lac red, forming simple diamond motifs, echoes perhaps of indigenous Khmer geometric medallions. Khmer ministers noted the silk's delicate strength, threads only a few deniers thick, yet tensile enough to withstand stretching. Legend says courtiers ran silk over marble domes in the royal baths, incorporating textile wonders into familiar ritual spaces. Courtly demonstrations to display its qualities. Sukhothai weavers performed tensile tests before King Jayavarman. A single ribbon of silk was stretched between two elephants without breaking, an impressive feat in front of hundreds. The spectacle reinforced silk's symbolic potency, a thread strong enough to bind kingdoms, yet refined enough to signal civilizational sophistication. 2. Merchant caravans and riverine routes. A. Overland and waterborne paths. Following the diplomatic exchanges, merchant networks flourished along two principal corridors. Upper Mekong route, from Sukhothai, caravans carried bales of silk rolls along the Yom and Nan rivers, portaging around. D rapids and linking to the Mekong at the Laos border. Riverine transport, seasonally dependent, saw silks moving downstream during high water, May-October. Khmer middlemen in Vat Phu, southern Laos, purchased silk by barter, mats, rice and forest products like benzoin resin. Cham coastal links, a parallel maritime route connected Sukhothai silk exporters to Champa ports, Tra Kiew and Monsoon, where Cham middlemen loaded silks onto larger junks bound across the Gulf of Thailand. From there, goods reached Ko Kuching on the Cardamom coast, then overland into western Khmer wetlands. B market exchanges in Angkorian bazaars, Angkor's grand marketplaces, clusters of stilted pavilions near the royal palace, thrived. Silk for sanctuary, Buddhist monasteries built in the late 13th century accepted silk cloth as offerings, wrapping statues of the Buddha in saffron-hued silk robes. Angkor Wat bas-reliefs later depict monks carrying fine textiles, a testament to silk's ritual integration. Artisan collaborations. Khmer dyers experimented dye vats with imported silks, teaching native weavers to produce two-ply rice fibre cord dyed in the same gamboge and lac hues, early hybrid palettes that blended foreign silk vibrancy with rustic fibre textures. 3. Cross-cultural weaving practices. A. Technical knowledge transfer, spinning innovations. Khmer weavers observed Sukhothai spinners using tension-controlled drop spindles with heavier whirls, allowing faster, finer spinning. Visiting artisans introduced adjustable whirls, removable clay discs, giving Khmer spindles multi-speed functionality. A Khmer treatise from the late 13th century, now lost but referenced in later Pali chronicles, reportedly described a dual spindle method, spinning two cotton or rice fibre threads simultaneously for balanced plying, likely inspired by Thai techniques. Loom adaptations, the Khmer ground. Loom's rigid crossbars gave way in some regions to a semi-vertical loom structure, similar to Thai front-beamed looms, where weavers could exert more downward pressure, producing tighter, denser fabrics. These looms, introduced in Prologue, modern Saigon, suggest inland migration of combined weaving techniques along trading networks. B. Pattern diffusion and iconography, motif migrations, diamond medallions, lotus rosettes, and paired bird motifs appear in both Sukhothai silk and Khmer rice fibre mats of the late 13th to 14th centuries. While silk featured finer, more intricate motifs, Khmer versions adapted them into larger, more geometric forms, preserving symbolic meaning while fitting coarser materials. Religious symbolism, Buddhist iconography, double Vajra 8-spoked wheel, imprinted in temple murals, found reflections in woven borders. Anchors of belief travelled with silk threads, embedding spiritual patterns into everyday mats and cloths. 4. Social and political impacts. A. Elite patronage and class identities. Courtly consumption. Khmer nobles began preferring silk for shawls and parasol coverings, signifying status. Yet they still sat on rice fibre mats in informal councils, displaying a layered class dynamic where coarse and fine textiles coexisted in ritual contexts. Guild formation. By mid-14th century, weavers organised into semi-formal guilds, praefke, grouping cotton, silk and rice fibre artisans under local officials. Guild membership conferred rights, exclusive market stalls during festival weeks and relief during lean seasons. B. Diplomatic and military dimensions, silk as soft power. Sukhothai silk gifts signalled peaceful intentions. Conversely, during Khmer incursions into Thai regions in the late 14th century, Khmer captives were required to weave rice fibre mats as tribute, a coercive tribute mirroring the silk for promise dynamic. Military logistics. Rice fibre mats served as durable ground coverings for army encampments. Commanders noted that combined use of silk awnings and rice fibre floor mats offered comfort and resilient. Ensign campaign tents, melding the two textiles' strengths. V. Unresolved thought. As you envision silken bolts glinting beside rough mats in Angkor's shadowed pavilions, consider this question. How did the interweaving of Sukhothai silk and Khmer rice fibre traditions create a textile tapestry that was as much about cultural diplomacy and religious patronage as it was about commerce? And what does this reveal about the power of everyday crafts to bind empires together? You journeyed from twilight paddies where rice stalks became coarse mats to Angkor's sun-drenched pavilions where gleaming Sukhothai silks draped temple walls. You saw how silk and rice fibre met in diplomatic gift cycles and market exchanges, sparking technical dialogues that wove two kingdoms closer. Now, we turn deeper to the economic, social and cultural forces that shaped this textile tapestry. The networks of merchants who navigated monsoon currents and overland portages, the artisan communities who balanced tradition with innovation, and the symbols that took on new life as warp and weft bound local aesthetics to regional identity. I, merchant networks and the flow of textiles. A, riverine trade during high water. From June through October, the annual flood sweep of the Mekong and its tributaries, Tonlé Sap, Bassac and Mun, transformed inland paths into watery highways. For textile merchants, this season offered unparalleled ease of movement. Sukhothai caravans to Prey No Khor. At Sukhothai's docks, brokers packed upturned bamboo tubes of salt-dyed silk bolts, binding them with canvas wrappings to keep out silt. Longboats, crewed by skilled oarsmen, navigated the winding Yom and Nan tributaries, joining the Mekong near the Laos border. By the time they reached Prey No Khor, modern Saigon, boats were laden not only with silk but with Khmer rice fibre mats returning north, bartered for fish, nits, est resins, and border salt, lake-harvested, unrefined. Market records from the 1320s note weekly flotillas carrying dozens of mat bundles and 5 to 10 silk bales apiece. Tonlé Sap's floating. Within the great Tonlé Sap Lake basin, floating jetties, rafts of bamboo tied to anchored trees, served as transshipment points. At dawn, merchants transferred goods between inland dugout canoes and larger seagoing junks. Silk destined for Champa passed through here first. Rice fibre mats made stops at village markets in Kampong Chnang, where local traders fetched premium silver for high-quality lotus silk from Sukhothai. Cost and risk. Passage fees, set by local barons at river choke points, varied in kind, a mat per registered canoe or a handful of silk thread per bolt. Pirates prowled narrow channels, demanding tolls under threat of sunk barges. Merchants countered by travelling in convoys, their combined firepower of gaff rigs and bamboo pole weapons deterring small raiders. B. Overland portage and caravanserai networks. When water levels fell, or for direct routes to Angkor, portage paths, silk rolls crossed land via the Kam Mekong portage, an 18-kilometre trail linking Kampong Cham to Prek Kadem. Caravans of elephants, valued for their strength, tramped packed goods along coral stone paths trodden over centuries. Each elephant carried up to 10 large silk bales. Surplus rice fibre mats rode in woven panniers strapped to sides. Caravanserai way stations. Along these routes, caravanserai, seasonal rest stops, provided lodging for merchants and animals, sometimes managed by Muslim Cham families specialising in trade hospitality. In Kampeng Trach, a stone-floored khan housed overnight markets. Sukhothai silk unrolled beside Khmer mats for appraisal under oil lamp glow. Taxation and diplomatic privileges. Royal envoys granted certain merchants Pasugdan, safe passage certificates, exempting them from local levies. These licenses, parchment scrolls sealed with an elephant head royal cipher, ensured goods passed free of harassment by petty lords. In return, merchants gifted the sovereign with rare dyed silks and high thread count mats, reinforcing the political bond. 2. Artisan communities, guilds, workshops and interactions. A. The evolution of weaver guilds. Under Jayavarman Yeat's later reign, weavers coalesced into praifka guilds, formalising roles and standards. Guild hierarchy and regulation, master weavers, praithmen. Recognised by the royal court, these hereditary artisans oversaw major temple contracts and maintained dye recipes for indigo, gamboge and lac. Journeymen, prai trel. Employed by masters, they handled bulk mat orders and silk warp wound. Apprentices, prai sharau. Young novices, often aged 10-12, learned by assisting in washing tubs, oil lamp tending and shuttle passing under an oath of confidentiality. Standardisation edicts. A 1294 royal decree mandated minimum thread counts, 24 threads per inch for rice fibre mats, 120 threads per inch for silk cloth, documented on stone tablets at major guild halls, ensuring product consistency across workshops. Quality inspections. Guild inspectors, attired in indigo-dyed robes, sampled mats and silks monthly, testing tear resistance, thread uniformity, and colour fastness by rubbing with damp linen. Submissions failing standards were ripped apart publicly at guild halls, a deterrent against subpar craft. B. Workshop, interactions and cultural exchange. where silk and rice fibre met, innovation flourished. Hybrid weaving houses, in prey. Nokor's mixed textile quarters, workshops employed both rice fibre and silk looms under one thatch. Weavers crossed between looms, trading tips. Silk warps taught to rice fibre weavers, while rice fibre weft techniques enriched silk tapestry durability. Seasonal guild fairs. Twice a year, guilds convened in Angkor Thom's Great Court. Mats and silks displayed on raised dais, commissioned patterns auctioned to temple. Patrons. Master weavers demonstrated new twill variants. These fairs blended competition and camaraderie. Rival designs spurred technical breakthroughs, while shared meals and temple ceremonies fostered unity. Cultural synthesis. Khmer royal sculptors, inspired by woven motifs, carved lintels echoing textile geometries, checkerboard, diamond and stylized wave patterns, melding visual arts and fibre arts into a unified Khmer aesthetic. 3. Trade disruptions and adaptive strategies. By the mid-14th century, military conflicts, ecological shifts and shifting preferences challenged weaving economies. Political turbulence and market interruptions, fall of Sukhothai influence. As Ayutthaya eclipsed Sukhothai in the late 14th century, silk quality fluctuated. Inter-kingdom conflicts intermittently blocked trade routes, prompting Khmer merchants to stockpile rice fibre mats and seek alternate silk sources from the Shan states and Yunnan. Cham and Malay intermediaries. With overland links severed, Khmer traders contracted Cham and Malay sea captains. Silks shipped from Malacca and Patani reached Ko Kuching, then funneled along cardamom rivers. These new routes introduced batik-style dyes and Malay geometric motifs into Khmer weaving practice. Evidence in 15th century textile fragments showing copper dye resist patterns on silk-rice hybrids. Ecological adaptations, irrigation adjustments. In response to reduced natural soaking streams, weavers dug communal soaking pits lined with terracotta tiles, fed by manually diverted irrigation channels. Though labour-intensive, these pits allowed continuous fibre processing during dry periods. Alternative fibres. Villagers experimented with sugarcane bagasse and lotus stem fibres as substitutes for rice. While these produced coarser yarns unsuited for mats, they found niche uses in rope and basketry, illustrating craft resilience and willingness to adapt to environmental constraints. 4. Cultural dimensions, ritual, symbolism and legacy. The intermingling of silk and rice fibre traditions created layered Q. Cultural products. Textile symbolism in ritual life, funerary shrouds and temple offerings. Hybrid mats, rice fibre base with silk fringe, served as shrouds for commoners in death rites, while pure silk cloth draped images of deities. The juxtaposition of coarse and fine textiles in sacred contexts underscored social hierarchies and interconnected fates. Marital dowries. Noble marriages assembled bundles, 6 rice fibre mats for the bridal chamber, 8 bolts of silk for ceremonial garments. These dowries symbolised domestic stability, mats, and political alliance, silk, woven together in matrimonial contracts. Artistic imprints and continuities, architectural echoes. Later Khmer temples incorporated textile-like carvings, balustrade friezes imitating woven patterns, capitals shaped like shuttleheads, an enduring homage to the kingdom's textile traditions. Linguistic traces. The Khmer word for weave, kenhe, appears in royal edicts alongside words for treaty and covenant, suggesting that weaving was metaphorically linked to political binding, a linguistic echo of silk and threads, literally uniting peoples. Unresolved point. As you picture convoys of longboats threaded down flooded forests, their hulls creaking under bundles of silken mats, and imagine guild halls echoing with shuttleclacks and fervent debates over dye ratios, consider this question. How did the dynamic interplay of economics, ecology and artistry between Sukhothai's gleaming silks and Khmer rice fibre mats forge a textile tradition that transcended local utility to become a medium of diplomacy, ritual and enduring cultural synthesis? Tapestry of transformation, decline, revival and enduring threads. You've traced the flourishing trade of Sukhothai silks and Khmer rice fibre mats, how river currents carried bolts and bundles, guilds wove patterns into politics and ritual, and Oars. Artisans exchanged techniques to create hybrid textiles. Now, in this final chapter of Story 2, we follow the climactic shifts that unravelled these early exchanges, Ayutthaya's rise, ecological change, and colonial disruptions. Then we explore how modern revivalists, historians and craftspeople have sought to rekindle the shared textile heritage of Southeast Asia, revealing the resilience of human creativity and the lessons woven into every surviving thread. The unravelling, political upheaval and market realignments. Ayutthaya's ascendancy and shifting alliances. By the mid-14th century, Ayutthaya emerged as a formidable Thai principality. eclipsing Sukhothai and redrawing regional power. Trade route realignments, Ayuthya's strategic
location on the Chao Phraya River allowed it to control maritime rice exports to the Malacca Straits. Sukhothaian by extension, its silk exports lost preferential river access deals, diverting trade through Ayuthyan ports. Khmer merchants, wary of Ayuthya's naval strength, sought alternative sources of silk via Kham and Malay intermediaries, diluting direct Sukhothai-Khmer exchanges. Diplomatic friction. Suthin chronicles recount border skirmishes with Khmer forces near the Mun River circa 1370, disrupted caravan safety and river toll disputes, raised shipping costs and risk, causing small-scale weavers along the corridor to curtail cross-border ventures, favoring local rice fiber production over uncertain silk imports. Guild realignment. Skilled charters in Prenoka and Longvek. Adapt. New inscriptions refer to authorized Ayuthyan silks alongside older Sukhothai imports. Masters recalibrated dye recipes to match Ayuthya's cochineal reds and indigo blues, transforming the symbolic language of textile hues even as supply chains shifted. Ecological flux and resource. Stress. Colonial irrigation and deforestation, intensified under French rule in the 19th century, further strained weaving economies. Irrigation, overhaul. Massive canal projects drained wetlands critical for natural fiber soaking, forcing artisans to improvise energy-intensive boiling pits or limited soak baths. By century's end, only the most remote villages retained reliable soaking streams. Forest extraction concessions for teak and mahogany clear-cut riparian buffers. Loss of thatch palms and bamboo for loom frames and spindle shafts hindered equipment. Maintenance. Weavers scavenged termite hollowed trunks or repurposed railway sleepers, compromising tool quality and slowing production. Population. Displacement. Forced labor and conscription during colonial revolts fragmented villages. Artisan lineages scattered. Younger generations migrated to urban centers or rubber plantations, severing intergenerational knowledge transfer to cultural memory and 20th century rediscovery of an as-active Sukhothai Khmer. Textile exchanges ceased. Threads of memory endured. Oral histories and village lore in villages along the Tonlé Sap tributaries. Aging weavers recall hybrid textiles. Song memories. Elders sing fragments of Silk Lotus Serenade, a folk ballad recalling Mekong flotillas, laden with golden silk and mats bound with lotus fiber cords. Though melodies fade, the refrain Threads of Two Kingdoms, woven by water's hand, lingers as mnemonic residue. Weavers chronicle small palm leaf notebooks, hidden during wartime upheavals, preserved patterns and dye recipes, though many perished from humidity and neglect. Surviving folios written in Pali and early Khmer scripto for rare glimpses of 14th century color formulas, and we've COUNTSB early ethnographic expeditions from the 1930s onward. Colonial and post-colonial scholars documented remnants. Jean-Baptiste Pichen's Field Notes 1932. The French ethnologist describes ghostly looms in Wat courtyards, with idle spindles draped in thread remains. His photographs sepia-toned images of wizened spinners holding brittle fibers garnet. Academic interest in Southeast Asian textile heritage. King Sisowath's Cultural Commission's 1950s Cambodian monarchy-sponsored expeditions sought to catalogue endangered crafts. Weavers in Angkor Province demonstrated hybrid techniques on reconstructed front beam looms. Their demonstrations, filmed on 16mm, circulated regionally but reached few rural youths. 3. Modern revival. Innovation rooted in tradition despite centuries of decline. The late 20th and early 21st centuries see a resurgence of interest. Artisan cooperatives and fair trade models. River Weave Collective Est. 2005 Khmer-led NGO unites weaving families from Tonlé Sap, offering micro-grants for tool repair and cooperative silk procurement from Thai partners. Cooperative mats blend rice fiber with small silk accents. Heritage lines sold to ecotourists and design boutiques in Phnom Penh and Bangkok. Sukhothai Silk Revival Project. Thai cultural foundations restore Pala-style silk patterns. Young artisans learn agile tie-dye techniques. Mat Mi Pad with experimental rice fiber mat weaving, forging Suthet placemats that honor both legacies. Academic and museum initiatives. Textile archives at Royal University. A digital database catalogues surviving textiles, high-resolution images of motif fragments, fiber analysis reports, and 3D loom reconstructions. VR reenactments allow researchers and students to virtually operate warps and wefts, preserving tactile knowledge. Angkor Weave Festival biennial in Siem Reap. This festival brings together Thai and Khmer weavers for live demonstrations, pattern swap workshops, and marketplace exchanges. Festival commissions include collaborative pieces, Two Kingdom tapestries, celebrating shared histories, for lessons woven through time. The rise, fall, and rebirth of Sukhothai Khmer textile exchange offers key insights. 1. Textile diplomacy and soft power insight. Cloth, whether silk or rice fiber, carried political weight. Gifts forged alliances, embargoes fractured relations. Contemporary application. Cultural exchanges via crafts can underpin modern diplomacy. Cooperative textile projects can build cross-border goodwill in Southeast Asia. Point 2. Craft ecology and resilience. Insight. Availability of water, fiber, and wood-defined weavings. Viability. Contemporary application. Sustainable craft revival must integrate environmental stewardship, protecting river flows, replanting buffer forests, and securing ethical tool materials. 3. Innovation through exchange. Insight. Hybrid textiles, silk fiber mats, and rice fiber cords emerged from cross-cultural dialogue. Contemporary application. Encouraging artisan collaborations across regions can spark new designs, sustaining traditions by making them relevant to modern markets. 4. Memory as a resource. Insight. Songs, folios, and film archives nurtured cultural memory even absent active practice. Contemporary application. Documenting intangible heritage, oral histories, choreography of tool use, and mnemonic songs ensures revival efforts have authentic foundations. Reflective resonance. As you imagine 14th century spinners plying silk and rice fiber beneath bamboo roofs, and modern artisans reweaving those ancient strands into new forms. Ponder this question: how can the intertwined fates of Sukhothai silks and Khmer rice fiber mats inspire us to forge resilient, ecologically rooted craft collaborations today, honoring the past while weaving sustainable futures across borders and cultures? At the heart of the hamlet of morning, among the looms, imagine first light spilling across a small riverside village, its thatched stilt houses rising above the glinting Mekong backwater. You wake to the low hum of the river and the soft creak of wooden walkways. From the earliest hour before dawn's chorus of birds, you can sense the village's true heartbeat, the steady clack-clack of looms being prepared, spindles spinning, and the ritual gathering of villagers around communal workspaces. This is no romantic artisan enclave, but a tightly woven social organism, where every household's well-being hinges on the rhythm of fiber, flame, and family. Dawn preparations, water, fire, and fiber fetching. The morning water before the sun rises. Children shoulder bamboo buckets to the nearby canal. In the cool pre-dawn air, they draw water for both household cooking and the small clay pots used to boil rice fiber strips. The same buckets will later carry rinsed fibers back to family doorsteps for airing and dyeing. Stoking the communal hearth. At the center of the raised communal hall, the hearth fire is banked overnight. Dawn's first task: reignite embers with dried palm fronds, coaxing a low flame that will heat spindles, maintain dye pots, and later soften fibers in boiling vats. The firemaster, often an elder, is revered for knowing exactly how much wood yields the steadiness needed for delicate fiber work. Sorting and grading. Fibers. Families lay out soaked rice fiber strips on wide bamboo trays. Each strip is inspected under lantern light and first sunlight, its thickness and pliability judged by calloused fingertips. Strips to coarse become cordage, those fine and even become weaving yarns. This morning ritual, conducted in hushed focus, sets the standard for that day's production. 2. Spinning circles. Apprentices and masters gathering at the spindle post, around a sturdy post in the communal hall. Spinners convene in concentric circles. Apprentices, often children and teenagers, sit at the inner ring, watching as master spinners demonstrate the precise flick of the wrist that drafts fiber into supple singles. The click of drop spindles fills the air, punctuated by soft instruction: keep tension, not too tight. The language of fiber spinners speak in terms of watt, the initial twist, saw fiber drafting, and calm winding onto spindle. Each term passed orally ensures that, even without written manuals, the craft survives. Across generations, apprentices mimic syllables and motions, internalizing both vocabulary and muscle memory. Apprenticeship and social bonds. The morning's spinning circles are more than vocational training. They are social grounds where families exchange new river levels, the upcoming festival, or the price of market fish. Through shared labor, weaving families forge mutual support networks that extend beyond the loom. Weaving on ground. Looms technique and tempi loom setup and warp dressing. As the sun climbs, weavers arrive with bundles of dried, pounded fibers. 2 horizontal bamboo beams, front and back, are anchored between wooden posts. Warps of spun yarn are set at precise intervals using carved notches, a process requiring quiet care. Each thread's position dictates the final mat's weave density. Basic weaves and variant patterns. The default tabby weave 1/1 yields a sturdy, uniform mat, but seasoned weavers introduce simple twill or diamond grid patterns by shifting warp-weft sequences. These subtle variants, passed through whispered instruction, allow each household to mark its mats with identifiable signatures, daily quotas, and market goals by midday. Most families aim for 4 to 6 narrow strips 30 to 40 centimeters wide, 1.5 to 2 meters long per loom. Success means selling mats at the weekly floating market. Shortfalls require supplemental rice farming tasks or foraging for forest goods. The loom thus binds individual skill to communal sustenance. Midday break, ritual cleansing and communal meals. Water rinse. Ritual at solar noon. Weavers pause for the Khmer ritual rinse, Heated water from clay pots, infused with crushed lemongrass, is sprinkled over hands and arms to remove oil and dust. This act cleanses both body and craft, symbolizing respect for fibers and tools. Shared meals on raised platforms. Families convene under shade cloths strung between houses. Rice porridge, grilled fish, and wild greens are passed from pot to pot. Conversations range from river gossip to teaching moments an apprentice's first successful weave, or a master's note on adjusting dye ratios. Storytelling and knowledge transmission. Elders often tell short tales how their grandparents first learned to spin on monsoon nights, or the 1 year a flood washed away all soaking pits. These narratives embed technical lessons within communal memory, keeping history tethered to daily practice. Unresolved thought. As the midday sun warms the lacquered bamboo looms in villages, prepared to return to the hearth-lit spinning circles. Consider this question. In a world where professional crafts are often isolated, how did the daily rhythms of a weaving hamlet its spinning circles? Ground looms, shared meals, and story-laden breaks foster both resilience and continuity. And what might we learn from this integrated approach to work, community, and knowledge transmission? You witnessed the intimate morning rituals of a weaving hamlet, children drawing water, elders stoking the hearth, spindles clicking in communal circles, and ground looms inked with family motifs. Now, we follow the village through the ebb and flow of seasons, how monsoon floods both empower and disrupt weaving, how itinerant traders shape local production, and how weavers innovate with limited resources to keep their looms humming. Through these threads, you'll see a craft not frozen in time but dynamically adapting to environmental rhythms, market forces, and social change. Monsoons embrace and challenge flooded fields as fiber factories each year. From June through October, the Mekong's monsoon waters swell fields into shallow lakes for rice fiber weavers. These floods offer an elongated soaking season. Continuous soaking windows. Families capitalize on high water by floating bundles of rice stalks in secured bamboo rafts. The gentle current ensures uniform softening over 3 to 4 days, shorter than dry season soak times, yielding more pliable fibers and reducing pounding labor by nearly half. Extended fiber pounding platforms. Villagers erect makeshift pounding platforms on stilts above floodwaters. Wooden mallets raised above water level deliver rhythmic thuds that echo across inundated paddies, an acoustic indicator that weaving season is at its height. Storms, erosion, and loom damage. But the same floods that ease fiber preparation can wreak destruction. Erosive currents, sudden flash floods carve away riverbanks, undermining bamboo stakes anchoring thatch-sheltered looms. Weavers salvage warped poles and rebuild workshops, often in collaborative repair gatherings where multiple families pitch in, singing repair chants to steady the work. Humidity's toll on yarn. High humidity and constant dampness invite mold on drying yarns. Workshops incorporate smoke pits, low aromatic embers of tick leaves to hang spun bundles above, using smoke's antiseptic properties to stave off mildew. This practice, though effective, infuses fibers with a subtle resinous fragrance, becoming a hallmark scent of monsoon mats. Market forces, itinerant traders, and price volatility. At the rhythm of the floating market. Weekly, the hamlet's weavers load finished mats onto small boats for the floating market at Kampong Luong. Seasonal price swings in post-harvest months. Abundant mat supply drives prices down. Villagers earn as little as 2 measures of fish for a standard mat. Conversely, in dry months February-April, scarcity of fresh mats and higher sand fiber brittleness push prices up to 4 fish measures, incentivizing weavers to store surplus mats for later sale. Trader negotiations. Itinerant Khmer traders, adept at bargaining, arrive with baskets of smoked fish and woven silk scarves. They offer fixed exchange rates based on their stock levels and downstream demand. A shrewd weaver times sales when traders' silk supplies run low, often immediately after peak tourist season in Panam, securing better barter terms. Credit, debt, and cooperative responses. Informal credit systems during lean months. Weavers borrow rice and fish on credit from market traders, pledging future mat deliveries. Interest charged in extra mat length or thicker weave can equal 10 to 15% of principal value. Emergence of weavers, cooperatives recognizing vulnerability to trader volatility. Mid-20th century weavers formed loose cooperatives, sharing credit risks, pooling mats to sell in bulk at fixed prices, and using communal stores of smoked fish to satisfy initial trader credit demands. These cooperatives, though fragile, provided social insurance against market swings. 3. Technological adaptations and experimental weaves. Simple loom enhancements. Faced with economic pressure, weavers tinker with loom design, adjustable tension beams. Basic bamboo poles give way to mortised wooden beams with screw-adjustable tension blocks borrowed from Chinese cotton loom designs. This allows finer control over weave tightness, improving mat durability and enabling narrower, higher-value specialty mats. Foot-operated shuttle release. Innovative weavers rig simple foot pedals fitted with leather straps to hold and release the weft shuttle, freeing both hands for warp adjustments. Though slower to adopt, Early adopters command modest price premiums for more uniform mats. B. New fiber experiments to diversify products and respond to textile competition. Villagers trial alternative fibers. Lotus thread integration inspired by northern Buddhist monasteries. Weavers extract silky threads from lotus stems by blending lotus fiber warps with rice fiber wefts or vice versus they produce lightweight prayer mats with soft texture and subtle golden sheen. These hybrid mats find niche markets among temple goers, fetching double the price of standard mats. Banana leaf fiber. Cordage leaf fibers from banana plants, once considered waste, are dried, steeped, and woven into coarse ropes. Though less suited for mats, these ropes serve agricultural uses, tying palms, bundling harvest, supplementing weavers' incomes outside weaving season. For social transformations and the loom's future, migration and knowledge transfer. Urban migration patterns as young villagers seek factory work in Phnom Penh. Weaving apprenticeships dwindle. In response, some master weavers travel with portable, mini looms to urban craft fairs demonstrating techniques, selling mats, and recruiting interested city youths to return for rural training residency. Diaspora weaving hubs. Cambodian immigrants in the United States and France form small weaving circles, sharing ancestral techniques and merging them with local fibers, for example, linen and hemp. These diaspora hubs invigorate original villages through remittances and pattern exchanges. B. Cultural revitalization through festivals. Hamlet Weave Weeks. Annual Weave Weeks revive communal weaving gatherings, inviting tourists and youth to spinning and loom weaving workshops. Traditional songs, pounded fiber demonstrations, and mat dyeing sessions ensure participatory immersion. Digital story maps. NGOs partner with villagers to create interactive online maps. Users click Hamlet markers to watch short videos of local weavers narrating their family's weaving history and demonstrating techniques, preserving intangible heritage for global audiences. V. Unresolved question. As the river's currents ebb and surge around a loom perched on bamboo stilts, and as weavers balance ancient rhythms with experimental innovations. Contemplate this. What can the adaptive ingenuity of a weaving hamlet, seasonal labor patterns, market cooperatives, and fiber experiments teach us about sustaining small-scale crafts in an era of rapid economic and ecological change? The flood's first breath preparing the fields and fiber. Siove walked morning paths to thatched weaving halls and learned how spindles sing in communal circles. Now, feel the pulse of the seasons as the Mekong's monsoon breath swells fields and shapes every thread you'll touch. In this section you'll trace how the annual rains dictate when rice is sown, stalks are harvested, and fibers are woven. Entire villages synchronize their labor and rituals to the flood's slow advance and retreat. By understanding this delicate choreography between water, earth, and human hands, you'll see that the craft of rice fiber weaving is not merely a side endeavor, but a living embodiment of seasonal resilience. I. The arrival of the monsoon, ritual and observation. A. Sky signs and early prayers long before the first clouds gather over the Cardamom Mountains. Villagers watch subtle omens, the return of migratory swallows to riverbank clumps, the scent of distant incense from pilgrim caravans, and the earth's quiet hum as subterranean currents warm. Village elders gather under the banyan tree at dusk to recite ancient verses, blessings, petitioning Priya Naga, the serpent deity believed to control the Mekong's waters. Through whispered chants and palm leaf offerings, communities acknowledge that their fate fields, fibers, and livelihoods rests on the serpentine swell to come. Be communal forecasting pilots of traditional longboats, with skippers who navigate flooded channels year after year. Consult celestial charts and bamboo porcupine quills tied to They compare the monsoon's expected rise with ancestral flood markers carved into stone stele at temple courtyards. If waters promise an early surge, villagers hasten to finish land prep. If delay looms, they extend dry season thatch roofs, repotting indigo vats, and reinforcing loom posts. This informal forecasting blends empirical observation with cultural memory, ensuring each household sets its schedule well before the first rain. 2. Planting the rice, balancing cultivation and craft. A. Flood recession. Agriculture. As monsoon floods crest, often in July, paddies transform into shallow lakes. In this inundated landscape, farmers practice recession planting, seeding rice directly into the silty, nutrient-rich waters once they begin to recede in August. Seed selection. Households select hardy, glutinous rice varieties whose stalks yield the longest fibers. Only one of every 5 rice heads, grown from the previous year's best seeds, is reserved for fiber production. The rest feed the family. Transplant timing. Small rice nurseries, located on raised ridges, nurture seedlings for 2 weeks before transplant by synchronizing transplant with water retreat. Fields maintain optimal moisture without drowning tender shoots. B. Intercropping and fiber reserves between rice rows. Villagers plant sun-loving legumes and fiber-support plants. Morning glory vines trained along bamboo trellises. These vines serve dual purposes. Their broad leaves shade seedlings, and at harvest, their coarse stems supplement rice stalks when fiber yields are low. This early season intercropping ensures fiber reserves even in poor rice harvests, demonstrating agricultural foresight tied directly to weaving needs. 3. Harvest and fiber extraction. Timing and technique. Coordinated harvest festivals by November. When fields recede fully, the harvest begins. Whole villages converge for multi-day festivals, threshing circles. Families conduct communal threshing on raised wooden platforms. Handfuls of grain are beaten, with short, broad bats. Kernels separate from stalks in rhythmic clouds of chaff. As grain carts depart for communal granaries, long bundles of stalks await their turn in fiber production. Fiber stockpiling. Selected stalk bundles tied with cotton strips denoting premium fiber are stacked under open sheds. Seasonal winds pass through these sheds, drying stalks to a precise moisture content before soaking. B. Soaking pits in monsoon. Water-shallow soaking pits dug along canal banks are reopened each year by the entire community. Pit refurbishment. After months of silt accumulation, pits require clearing. Villagers kneel ankle-deep in muddy water, using woven reed baskets to remove sediment layers. This labor-intensive cleanup, guided by elder water wardens, ensures pits hold clear. Gently flowing water. Fiber immersion. Contractors' respected fiber masters direct the sinking of tied stalk bundles onto bamboo rafts moored at pit centers. Floating stalks soften evenly as canal currents flow through inlet bamboo sluices. After 5 to 7 days, adjusted by water temperature, fibers reached optimal pliability. For the pounding ritual, communal resonance, rhythm and cooperation. At the heart of fiber extraction lies the pounding ritual. Beaters' assemblies on raised wooden platforms beside the soaking pits. Groups alternate pounding duty. Wooden mallets carved from resilient hardwood rise and fall in choreographed sequences, their thuds echoing across fields. Teams synchronize strokes with drumbeats, enhancing efficiency and forging social bonds. Mallet blessings. New mallets receive ceremonial anointing with turmeric and rice wine, invoking craft deities to protect tools and prevent fiber breakage. The blessing conducted by an elder spinner marks mallet life cycles, after which worn tools are respectfully retired to village shrines. B. Probing fiber softness after pounding. Fiber samples undergo tactile testing, elder inspection. Master weavers press small tufts between thumb and forefinger. A satisfying snap indicates residual brittleness, prompting additional pounding. When fibers yield a soft ribbon-like bending, they pass to the rinsing stage. Zero waste mindset. Coarser fibers, failing detailed tests, are sorted into brushwood. Bundles for household brooms or corded, ensuring no stalk goes unused, a testament to communal sustainability. V. Weaving. Preparations, calendars and community planning. A. Seasonal labor calendars with fibers ready by early December. Village leaders convene planning councils under banyan tree pavilions. Loom allocation. Each household claims time slots on communal looms. Small wooden schedules pinned to central posts. Detail morning and afternoon sessions from December through February. These slots rotate weekly to ensure equitable access. Dye workshops, concurrently dye masters, harvest madder roots, indigo leaves, and lacrocin scheduling dye days where large iron pots bubble under woven shelters. Community participation ensures enough dyed yarns for the weaving season. B. Communal celebrations before the weaving begins. The Festival of Thread, held on the first full moon of December, marks transition. Offerings and dances, rice fiber mats, are unfurled in temple courtyards decorated with petals and incense. Dances mimic spinning and weaving motions, connecting villagers to ancestral weavers. Oaths of craft. Weavers renew informal oaths of craft, promising to share techniques, uphold quality standards, and teach at least one apprentice. Social contracts that safeguard knowledge transmission. Unresolved thought. As the floodwaters recede and the river's last reflections fade from stalk-soaked pits, imagine villagers preparing to spin and weave through the cool season. Reflect on this. How does the monsoon's rhythm, its floods, fertile soils and communal rituals shape not just the technical process of rice fiber weaving, but the very social fabric and resilience of weaving communities? You witnessed how the monsoon's pulse dictated every stage of rice fiber weaving, from sacred flood omens and communal forecasts, through flood recession planting and the pounding ritual, to calendars of loom allocation and celebratory festivals. Now, in this final chapter of Story 4, we followed the craft from the first on after harvest weaves to the final bundled mats bound for market. We explore how weavers train the next generation amid seasonal constraints, and we reflect on the enduring lessons of seasonal cooperation, ecological attunement, and cultural resilience that the monsoon threads still teach today. The weaving season's climax. Dawn of the weave week, with fibers rinsed, pounded, and dried by the season's cool breezes. Villages enter the busy weave week, a period of intense production spanning mid-December to late January. Pre-dawn loom light before roosters crow. Telaks and apprentices light single-wick oil lamps at each loom station. The lamp's soft, golden glow flickers across taut warps, illuminating floating threads as spinners and weavers settle into their rhythm. Coffee fresh breakfast ritual on the communal planked floor. Fish cakes sizzle in palm oil skillets while aromatic, ground coffee simmers in a small clay pot. Weavers sip bitter coffee and nibble steamed fish snacks to fuel lean hours ahead. The shared meal underscores communal interdependence, energy for bodies and camaraderie. For spirits.b. Daily quotas and quality checks throughout Weave Week. Each household maintains strict production goals. Mat output targets experienced weavers. They aim to produce 2 full-width mats 1.5 by 2 meters per day. Journeymen manage 1. Apprentices assist but seldom complete full mats. These quotas ensure sufficient quantity for trade fairs and village stockpiles. Midday inspection huddle at noon each day. Master weavers convene under the banyan tree. Examine finished mats for weave uniformity, thread count adherence, and pattern fidelity. Mats falling short are returned for partial rewrites, an exacting quality control tradition that honors both craft integrity and communal reputation. C. Evening transmission, storytelling and apprenticeship. As dusk falls, looms idle and hands tire. Villagers gather around communal hearths. Technique demonstrations. Master weavers demonstrate subtle techniques, how to adjust heddle spacing for pattern shifts, how to detect tension imbalances by ear as shuttle clacks vary in pitch. Apprentices sit cross-legged, absorb gestures, and practice small test strips by campfire light. Narrative. Weave chants. Lighter moments feature the recitation of weavers' chants, melodic couplets that encode complex steps. For example, a line referencing 2:30 turn cues the precise moment to shift leftovers. These rhythmic chants, passed down orally, ensured that even if a mat is imperfect, the underlying knowledge remains embedded in village memory. Festival of the First Mats. At the end of Weave Week comes the First Mats Festival, a communal celebration marking the season's culmination. A ritual unfurling an offerings. Temple, courtyard display mats woven by each household are unfurled on stone steps of the village pagoda, their patterns and edge trims displayed in the open air. Villagers walk the display, tossing rice grains and flower petals onto mats as blessings for quality and productivity. Offerings to deities and ancestors. A ceremonial hearth is lit before the pagoda. Village elders place small mat fragments, incense, sticks and palm leaf inscriptions, naming departed weavers into the flame. A ritual acknowledging past generations who shaped the craft's lineage. Be communal tasting and market bargains following rituals. The mats serve practical and festive roles. Shared meal on new mats. Village feasts unfold atop freshly woven mats laid end-to-end beneath lantern-lit galleries. Sticky rice, grilled catfish, and spiced coconut curries are served. Family-style mat surfaces both seating and tablecloth. Binding craft with communal sustenance. Early bird buyer visits local traders, informed by per-festival whispered promises. Descend on the display. They inspect edges for weave density and ask about dye origins. Bargains struck here, often paid in cooked fish or sweet. Rice wine set price benchmarks for the upcoming floating market. 3 weavings waning in knowledge preservation as February's warmth returns and high demand bows. Weaving slows, yet knowledge transmission and craft resilience persist. A post-weave reviews and tool maintenance collective debrief. Village foremen convene a final review under the banyan tree, discussing production successes, quality missteps, and dye batch results. These assessments inform next season's improvements, adjusting soaking durations, ordering new dye ingredients, and refining loom tensions. Tool repair workshops. Elders instruct younger villagers in tool care, sanding bamboo loom beams to remove warp scars, oiling pulley joints, carving replacement mallet heads. These workshops ensure that next Weave Week begins with fully functional equipment. B. Archivists of oral heritage, recognizing the importance of intangible heritage. Audio recording by cultural NGOs. Nonprofits record elders narrating seasonal protocols, from selecting seed stalks in March to final mat bundling in January. These audio archives, preserved on digital memory devices, safeguard chants, instructions, and local flood law for future generations. Intergenerational apprenticeships. Formal apprenticeship pacts are drafted. Master weavers commit to training 2 youths for a full weaving cycle 1 year with stipends provided by cooperative earnings. These commitments, signed in ink on palmleaf craft bonds, protect knowledge transfer amid increasing rural migration. For seasonal craft in a changing climate. Climate shifts pose new challenges and tests of communal adaptability. A shifting monsoon patterns, erratic flooding recent decades see unpredictable flood. Timing. Late onset monsoons delay planting and fiber soaking, compressing Weave Week into narrow windows. Villagers have begun experimenting with portable soaking tubs, lined with UV-stabilized canvas, heated by small gas burners to simulate flood conditions. Extreme flood events. Unprecedented high floods wash away soaking pits and damaged loom platforms. In response, some hamlets build elevated soaking vats, concrete-lined cisterns with overflows ensuring fiber processing continuity amid high water events. B. Economic pressures and craft futurism. Driven demon decotourism lodges now commission village mats as decorative items, oversized, colorful variants requiring new dye techniques. While lucrative, this trend risks altering traditional patterns to suit outsider tastes, challenging weavers to balance authenticity with market viability. Digital marketplaces artisans adopt mobile phone-based platforms to pre-sell mats globally, leveraging fair trade networks, down payments finance, cooperative tool upgrades. Final deliveries follow museum quality standards, heralding a new phase where rural craft intersects digital economies. The enduring lessons from the Monsoon loom, the seasonal dance of weaving hamlets choreographed by floods and foreshadowed by ancestral rituals, offers timeless insights. 1. Crafters' ecosystem lesson. Rice fiber weaving thrives at the nexus of ecology, economy, and social ritual. Each stage from harvest to pounding, weaving to market depends on predictable environmental cycles. Modern takeaway: sustainable crafts require holistic stewardship, protecting water flows, soil health, and communal governance to remain viable amid climate fluctuations. 2. Community coordination and shared calendars lesson. Collective calendars weave week. First, mats festivals synchronize labor, ensure resource access, and foster social cohesion. Modern takeaway: collaborative scheduling and ritual events can strengthen community identity in other contexts. Urban co-housing projects, cooperative agriculture, or shared makerspaces. 3. Knowledge transmission. Through ritual lesson, oral chants, apprenticeship bonds, and festival reenactments embed technical protocols within cultural memory, preserving craft beyond individual lifetimes. Modern takeaway: revitalizing fragile traditions. Benefits from multimodal documentation, audio-video, live demonstrations rooted in local languages and ceremonial contexts. Vi. Reflective resonance. You imagine the river's slow retreat revealing taut warps on bamboo beams, the flicker of lamps across countless woven threads, and the village's pulse marked by shared meals atop newly minted mats. Ponder this question: how might our own communities, whether urban, digital, or rural, draw upon the monsoon's seasonal weaving wisdom to craft collaborative, resilient systems that honor ecological rhythms, share knowledge across generations, and weave social bonds as enduring as any fiber? The artery of empire's geography, currents, and early Khmer traversed villages, looms by monsoon-lit hearths, and learned how rice fiber mats and Sukhothai silks wove kingdoms into a shared tapestry. Now, shift focus from the fibers themselves to the watery highways that carried them, the Mekong River and its tributaries. In this section, we will map how the river's currents, seasonal rhythms, and shifting channels carved pathways for trade, linking upland producers and lowland consumers, binding diverse polities from Yunnan to the Delta, and giving rise to markets that thrived on boat decks and floating jetties. By understanding the Mekong's geographic contours and hydrological personality, you'll see that this great river was far more than a backdrop. It was the lifeblood of commerce, a dynamic corridor that shaped the political, economy, and cultural exchange of mainland Southeast Asia. The Mekong's vast catchment geography as destined, stretching over 4,350 kilometers from the Tibetan Plateau to the South China Sea. The Mekong traverses 6 modern countries: China, Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam, encompassing some of the planet's most varied landscapes. Headwaters in the highlands originating in China's Qinghai Tibet Plateau, the Mekong, known there as the Langkangjiang, tumbles through deep gorges and steep canyons. In these upper reaches, strong seasonal snowmelt pulses translate into rapid spring floods. Traders and travelers here relied on sturdy dugouts and rafts, traveling light, carrying only high-value goods: silk bolts, salt cakes, and precious metals downstream, turning back before rapids became impassable. Middle reaches, the Lao Highlands, and cone falls. Upon reaching the Lao Highlands, the river widens and slows, flowing through fertile valleys near Luang Prabang and Vientiane. Yet, at Cone Falls, where water plunges 21 meters through a labyrinth of channels, overland portages around cataract zones became essential. Here, local Lao communities developed portage roads, rudimentary trails where goods were unloaded, carried on elephants or manpower, then reloaded onto boats to continue their journey. These choke points became natural hubs for transshipment, giving rise to early markets and caravanserai settlements. Lowland plains and the Tonlé Sap inlets south of Kratie. The Mekong's flow slows dramatically across Cambodia's central floodplain. One of its most remarkable features is the Tonlé Sap connection. From June to October, rising Mekong waters reverse the Tonlé Sap River's flow, swelling the Great Tonlé Sap Lake sixfold in volume. This natural flood pulse not only rejuvenated fisheries and rice fields, but allowed boats to circumnavigate the lake's vast perimeter, linking riverside hamlets to the national capital at Angkor and later Longvek.ii. Seasonal rhythms, flood and fallow in trade planning trade along. The Mekong was never static. It wove through an annual cycle dictated by monsoon rains. High water window June-November. As headwaters swell, tributaries and backwaters rise. Villages that lacked direct Mekong frontage suddenly found their fields and markets reachable by watercraft. Traders launched longboat fleets up to 20 vessels, each carrying voluminous cargoes of rice, mats, lacquerware, and forest goods. Navigational hazards receded as current speeds moderated in expansive floodplains, enabling loaded vessels to progress both upstream by poling and towing and downstream. Low water constraints December-May when rains ceased. Water levels fell sharply, channels narrowed and sandbars emerged, stranding deeper draft boats. Traders adapted by transferring cargo onto smaller, shallow-hold crafts, often flat-bottomed sampans or basket boats able to navigate narrow, shallow shoals overland. Pack routes around unnavigable stretches became crucial, spurring the development of overland trade corridors linking Tonlé Sap villages to coastal ports near Phnom Penh and Saigon. 3. Political frameworks and waterborne governance. River's commercial promise invited both cooperation and contestation. Among emerging states, Mandala model of river control. Pre-modern Southeast Asian polities organized influence as concentric mandalas, circles with authority fading outward. Control of river towns Luang Prabang, Vention, Stung Trung, Phnom Penh conferred rights to collect tolls, offer protection, and mediate disputes among boat-bound merchants. Tributary rulers often paid tribute to larger capitals Angkor or Ayutthaya for the right to administer riverine commerce in their areas. River tolls and safe passage. Charters. Traders procured passage and royal charters promising safe passage and exemption from petty levies sealed with royal emblems. In exchange for protection from piracy and rival lords, merchants paid annual river taxes in kind, tick logs, fish barrels, or crafted mats. Archaeological remains of stone stele at river fords, inscribed with volume tribute rates, offer concrete proof of formal river governance. For early trade centers, nodes of exchange along the Mekong's course, certain settlements rose to prominence as trade intrepids. Changsaen and Changkan, Tilo borderlands ideally positioned above the rapids. These towns served as inland silk collection points. Sukhothai and later Ayutthaya traders delivered Chinese silks, Indian cottons, and Persian dyes to local Lao emporia, exchanging them for tick resins and forest spices. Weekly markets here attracted a mosaic of ethnic groups Stai Kum, Hmong, transforming stalls into vibrant cultural crossroads. Stung Trang and Kampong Kam, Cambodia. Midstream villages like Stung Trang leveraged seasonal Tonlé Sap back to host floating markets where mats, rice, and fish were traded for Chinese ceramics and Portuguese metal goods by the 16th century. Further downstream, Kampong Kam developed a permanent river port with warehouses and customs houses, becoming a gateway between the interior and the Khmer capital Phnom Penh. Confluence and capital. At the confluence of the Tonlé Sap and Mekong rivers, Phnom Penh's strategic location led to its rise as a political and commercial nucleus. By the early 17th century, the city's riverside docks bustled with junks from Siam and Vietnam, Portuguese launches and Cambodian sandbar boats, transferring cargoes of sugar, timber, and rice fiber mats to regional and global markets. Technological aids and navigational expertise. Successful navigation of the Mekong required specialized knowledge and tools. Mapping currents and shoals. Local river pilots memorized seasonal sandbar formations and eddy patterns, relaying guidance orally to boat captains. They also used bamboo sounding poles to probe depths midstream, ensuring safe passage during low water periods. Boat design. Innovations. Traders commissioned longboats up to 30 meters in length, with flat keels and minimal freeboard, able to ride high flood waters at low water. Shallow-launched skiffs replaced them, demonstrating fluid boat economies tied to the river's moods. River chronicles and nautical poems. Monks and literati composed Kabok tonal nautical poems narrating river journeys, hazards, and seasonal lore, recited by boat crews during night watches. These verses combined practical guidance, beware the hidden shoal at Bend 7, with cultural reflections on the river's spirit. Unresolved thought as you imagine fleets of longboats bearing silks, rice, salt, and forest treasures, navigating cataracts, reversing tributary flows, and docking at floating bazaars. Consider this question: how did the Mekong's shifting channels, seasonal pulses, and political mandalas create a dynamic trade ecosystem that empowered diverse communities? And what might this living model of waterborne commerce teach us about designing resilient, cooperative networks in our own age of shifting global currents? You trace the Mekong's grand course from Tibetan headwaters and Lao Rapids through Cambodia's flooded plains to Vietnam's delta, and saw how its rhythms choreographed early trade routes, political mandalas, and riverside intrepid. Now, we dive deeper into the living commerce that unfolded on those waterways, the floating markets where mats and silks changed hands, the merchant communities who navigated seasonal hazards, and the ingenious adaptations, both technical and social, that turned the river into a year-round artery of exchange. Through their experiences, you'll see how commerce along the Mekong was not a one-way downstream drift, but a complex interplay of timing, technology, and human networks that wove together distant peoples and economies. Floating markets, trading on the waters, mirror ray, anatomy of the floating fairly morning gatherings well before dawn, long before land markets stirred. Clusters of wooden vessels, dugouts, sampans, and flat-bottomed bathtubs congregated in sheltered backwaters and oxbow lagoons. By lantern, or first light, merchants in woven conical hats arranged their wares, rolled rice fiber mats tied with brightly dyed bands. Silk boats perched atop flat decks, baskets of salt and fish balanced at prow and stern. Haggling and barter purchasers, weavers' families, temple servants navigated narrow canoe trails between boats, calling out price inquiries. Barter dominated. A bolt of silk might exchange for 3 mats plus a handful of dried fish, or 2 measures of freshwater pearls. Silver and cowrie shells circulated too, but on these floating fairs, the clack of barter reigned supreme. Social, hub and information exchange floating markets were also social forums. News traveled by word of mouth, rising water levels upstream, price changes in Angkor Thom, new salt harvests reported in riverine hamlets. Boat-to-boat messengers carried fragmentary information letters rolled in waterproof wax-coated tubes that isolated villages remained plugged into wider currents of politics and ecom-YB spatial. Organization and seasonal shift zonal arrangement markets often organized by commodity lanes. Nearest the shore, rice fiber mat vendors clustered. Farther out, silk merchants anchored together, fish traders staked out deeper channels. This spatial logic eased navigation and allowed buyers to locate product types swiftly in the dappled lantern light. High water expansion during peak floods. Market real estate expanded as surging waters inundated shoreline trees and fields. Vendors moved mat racks and silk creels into newly formed coves, creating vast floating bazaars that could accommodate hundreds of boats. Some years markets even coalesced around submerged pagoda platforms. Boats moored where temple steps once rose above water. Low water contraction in the dry season. When lagoons shrank and shoals appeared, floating markets contract. Traders clustered in deep water channels, and buyers disembarked to shaded wooden jetties, converting the floating fair into a hybrid land and water market. This flexibility illustrated merchants' adaptability to the river's seasonal moods. Merchant communities, networks, identities, and risks. The merchant diaspora along the Mekong ethnic and regional specializations. The Mekong's vast length nurtured distinct merchant traditions. Khmer traders from Panam Pen and Kompong Kam specialized in rice, timber, and rice fiber mats, leveraging hinterland connections. Lao boatmen from Vientiane and Stung Treng excelled in navigating rapids and portaging, offering transport services in exchange for trade commissions. Kam and Malay seafarers brought maritime trade, good spices, ceramics, metalwares from coastal ports, linking inland markets to the Indian Ocean world. Family firms and apprenticeships. Merchant families operated as multi-generational firms. Sons learned to pilot longboats by age 10. Daughters managed account-keeping and bargaining rituals. Apprenticeships lasted a decade, embedding navigational law, price patterns, and diplomatic protocols. B. Managing risk on the river. Piracy and privateering. River bandits and rogue naval militias posed constant threats. Merchants traveled in convoys up to 20 vessels strong, armed with bamboo pole spears and small crossbows. Some carried modest caches of gunpowder and short matchlocks, vestiges of coastal trade arms. Convoy escorts, supplied by local chieftains, sometimes fine-tuned their patrols to coincide with peak market days. Insurance through community. Formal insurance did not exist, but informal pacts did. If a boat sank, convoy partners redistributed cargo among surviving vessels and extended credit for resupply. Villagers on shore contributed labor and rice supplies to aid grounded families, an early form of mutual insurance rooted in communal solidarity. Diplomatic passes and trade. Charters. Merchants secured passaged letters granting safe passage, privilege to dock, and access to river gates. These charters, sometimes renewed annually, served as licenses to trade under the sovereign's aegis. Losing a charter through conflict or debt meant blacklisting, forcing merchants to relocate or join rival networks. 3. Technological innovations. Boats, navigation and trade, evolving boat designs. Longboat variants. Early longboats measured 6 to 8 meters, but by the 16th century, designs grew to 20 to 30 meters to maximize cargo. Their flat keels allowed shallow water drafting, while raised prows and sterns prevented waves from swamping open decks. Some boats featured simple plank cabins with woven reed walls offering crew shelter during extended voyages. Modular cargo barges in deeper channels. Bulky cargo timber logs, mats stacked in crates rode on modular barges tethered to towing. Boats, barges could be detached and moored to riverbanks for overnight storage. A technique preserving valuable goods from storms. B. Navigational aids and river infrastructure. Stone boundary markers at key rapids and bifurcations. Stone pillars, inscribed with high water markers and barge height limits, guided pilots. Morse code today. These relics once shone with whitewashed numbers indicating safe navigation depths. floating jetties and stilted warehouses. Merchants invested in semi-permanent floating jetties, platforms of bamboo tied to tree trunks to moor during peak markets. Stilted warehouses near historic ports stored silk bolts and mat consignments, protected by woven reed walls and lockable wooden shutters. Rope pulley portage systems around conefalls and other cataracts. Local engineers devised rope pulley rollers, heavy logs threaded through riverine posts, allowing barges to slide overland on greased wooden tracks, dramatically reducing portage labor. Cultural dimensions, rituals of departure and arrival. A boat blessing ceremonies launching rituals before setting out. Captains and crew gathered at riverside shrines. They offered rice, betel nuts, and incense, requesting Priya Naga's protection. A coconut husk was split upon the prow to liberate water spirits, ensuring safe passage. Pilgrim merchants, many traders also engaged in devotional cruises, carrying Buddhist relics between major temples via river. These pilgrim merchants combined commerce with piety, trading goods in one district, collecting alms in the next, reinforcing spiritual and economic bonds. B. Arrival festivals. Port town welcomes at market season's start. Port towns held arrival festivals, fireworks on riverbanks, drum performances on boat decks, and communal feasts highlighting newly arrived goods. Silk fashion shows, models draped in foreign textiles accompanied mat weaving demonstrations, celebrating shared riverine culture. Trade quays as social spaces. Quays functioned as more than loading zones. They were public squares. Children played between crates, musicians busked for passing traders, and matchmakers arranged marriages between merchant families, ensuring the river's commerce also bound. Kinship ties, the adaptive strategies for a changing Riviera, coping with climate variability. Flight prediction networks. In recent centuries, river communities formed intervals brokerages. Local observers posted flood flags on pagoda towers to signal upstream water rises, allowing downstream hamlets to prepare. This grassroots warning system spread by word of mouth across kilometers of waterways. Boat reinforcements. In response to stronger floods and faster currents, carpenters began reinforcing hull ribs with imported tick struts and splicing metal bands keels to resist damage from drifting debris. B. Shifts in trade patterns. Road and rail competition. The advent of colonial roads and the French-built Phnom Penh Railway 1880s siphoned trade from slow river journeys. Silk and mats moved faster overland, but at higher cost, reshaping markets. River merchants diversified into ferry services, tourism launches, and floating cafes, preserving livelihoods. Niche river-based economies. Some communities carved new niches, hosting cultural cruises for foreign visitors, offering guided river safaris, selling handmade mats to urban collectors, and operating floating guest houses, transforming the once solely commercial river artery into a multifaceted economic lifeline. Unresolved thought as longboats slide beneath riverine palms, their decks brimming with silks and rice fiber mats. As lanterned floating markets echo with haggling and song, consider this question. What can the Mekong's centuries-old model of adaptive, cooperative and ritual-infused commerce teach us about designing resilient trade and transport systems? Today's systems that honor environmental cycles, nurture local communities, and blend tradition with innovation. You traced how the Mekong's geography, seasonal rhythms, and political frameworks gave rise to vibrant riverine commerce, floating markets bustling with rice fiber mats and silks, merchant communities adapting boat designs and portage innovations, and ritual ceremonies weaving trade and belief. Now, we conclude by examining the forces that unraveled this traditional waterborne economy, the revival efforts that seek to reanimate the Mekong's trading pulse, and the enduring lessons embedded in its currents for creating resilient communities, transport and commerce networks today. Unraveling the water roads. Colonial infrastructure and overland competition. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, French colonial authorities constructed roads and railways, most notably the Phnom Penh line that paralleled and undercut traditional river routes. Goods once laboriously floated downstream in monsoon floods now zipped over steel rails. Cost and speed trade-off. Overland transit cut journey times from weeks to days, offered fixed schedules independent of water levels, and charged flat freight rates, while skewing trade volume toward rail. These networks marginalized small-scale river merchants, forcing many to abandon longboats for low-edge roadside services. Economic centralization. Rail hubs in Phnom Penh and Saigon concentrated commercial activity, siphoning it away from intermediate river towns like Kampong Cham and Stung Treng. Local floating markets shrank. Port town warehouses lay empty. Rivermaster families fragmented as younger generations sought work in urban factories. Ecological disruption and hydraulic projects. Post-colonial dam projects and irrigation canals further altered the Mekong's pulse. Dam-induced flow changes. Upstream dams in China and Laos regulated floodwaters, reducing peak flood heights and dampening the Tonlé Sap's dramatic flood reversal. Predictable, full inundations, once key for extended high water navigation, became erratic. shortening the floating market season and limiting natural soaking basins that supported fiber crafts along tributaries, canal and levee construction. Levees protecting rice paddies prevented annual floodwaters from nourishing floodplain ecosystems and supporting traditional boat passages through low-lying hamlets. Tributaries silted up, shoals proliferated, and boat traffic either rerouted to deeper channels or ceased altogether. See social transformation and the rivers. Retreat as waterway commerce waned, migration and urbanization. Riverine populations migrated to cities for employment. Dock workers became factory laborers. Boat builders switched to automobile garages. Intergenerational knowledge of navigation, shipbuilding, and floating market customs faded. Cultural loss. Floating market songs and riverwise chants went unlearned by youth. Stone boundary markers and rope pulley portage tracks once hailed as marvels of communal engineering fell into ruin, overtaken by dense vegetation and eroded banks. To revival and reinvention. Despite these declines, the Mekong's legacy endures through concerted revival efforts, a community-led floating market resurgence in Cambodia and Thailand, heritage tourism initiatives, villages around the Tonlé Sap and in the Thai borderlands host weekly heritage markets, recreating floating bazaars for domestic and foreign visitors. Traditional boats are refurbished. Mat weaving demonstrations and silk dyeing stalls accompany market vendors, reinforcing the river's cultural memory. Microfinance and cooperative models. River community cooperatives secure microloans to build new boats, combining fiberglass hulls with traditional superstructures and purchase shared storage facilities. These cooperatives re-establish bartering networks, granting members greater bargaining power and preserving equitable trade practices. Attack navigation aids and local mapping to counter ecological challenges. Digital river charts. NGOs collaborate with local pilots to produce GPS-enabled river maps, overlaying seasonal depth data, shoal locations, and safe anchorages. Open-source mobile apps allow boat captains to plan routes with community-verified updates, reinstating confidence in river travel. Community-maintained markers. Villagers refurbish and replace stone boundary posts and install simple bamboo depth poles at key bends, reviving grassroots improvements to navigational infrastructure. Hybrid river road logistics, recognizing that no single mode suffices. Intermodal transshipment hubs. In port towns like Krati and Kampong Cam, small container depots handle both boat and truck cargo. Mats, silks, and perishable goods shift seamlessly between vessels and lorries, extending traditional waterways into modern supply chains. River-based micro-enterprises. River tourism, eco-farming collectives, and floating cinemas where films, screened on boat-mounted screens, attract local audiences, blend commerce, culture, and community resilience. 3. Enduring lessons from the Mekong. 1. Embrace environmental rhythms in sight. River commerce thrived when aligned with monsoon floods and natural cycles. Application. Modern logistics and infrastructure, whether canals, rail, or digital networks, benefit from designing around local environmental rhythms rather than overriding them. 2. Cultivate community governance insight. Traditional mandalas of river authority, balanced state, local chiefs, and merchant consent. Application. Inclusive multi-level governance, engaging governance, cooperatives, and local custodians yields resilient transport systems, capable of mutual adaptation and shared stewardship. 3. Blend tradition with innovation. Sight. Merchant communities navigated both ancient currents and colonial rails, adapting boats, portage methods, and market formats. Application. Integrating heritage-informed practices, floating markets. Oral mapping with modern technology, GPS, mobile finance can sustain local economies while honoring cultural identity. 4. Remember intangible. Heritage insight. Nautical poems, boat blessing rituals, and barter customs preserve social cohesion through commerce. Application. Documenting and revitalizing intangible cultural elements, song cycles, market rituals, craft vocabularies. Anchors community memory and strengthens social capital in changing economies. IV. Final reflection. As longboats drift beneath riverside palms, their lanterns still flickering against dark water, and as we imagine merchants haggling in half-submerged pavilions, consider this question: what might it look like to design 21st century transport and trade networks in both rural and urban settings that honor environmental rhythms, empower local communities, and weave cultural heritage into the very fabric of commerce, just as the Mekong once did so seamlessly for centuries? When coarseness became currency, drivers of the silk tourist fiber shift wove journeyed down the Mekong's arteries, witnessed floating markets alive with gleaming silks and humble mats, and seen how monsoon-swollen fields set the rhythm for weaving villages. Now, shift your focus from the rivers that carried textiles to the very fibers themselves. From the fine, elusive threads of imported silk to the sturdy, homegrown rice stalks woven into everyday fabrics, In this section, you'll explore why communities once captivated by silk's sheen turned increasingly to rice fiber weaving, how economic pressures, ecological constraints, and social imperatives combined to tip the scales in favor of rice stalks over mulberry leaves. By tracing the complex interplay among market disruptions, material availability, and evolving tastes, you'll see that the shift was neither abrupt nor uniform but a gradual, adaptive response to the changing world of mainland Southeast Asia. The lure of silk, prestige, ritual, and early dependency. Silk's symbolic power. Silk arrived in Angkor and downstream kingdoms wrapped in political promise. Its production tied to settler culture requiring mulberry cultivation and laborious cocoon processing spoke of sophistication and hierarchical wealth. Royal courts draped statues and palaces in silk banners. Temples received silk robes as meritorious offerings. Noblewomen displayed silk saris in palace courts. Even among commoners, owning a scrap of silk, perhaps a neckerchief or stitched pocket, signified elevated status and connection to wider trade networks. Early silk supply chains and Ayutthaya monarchies fostered robust sericulture, exporting dyed silk across rivers and overland routes. Yet from the outset, silk imports remained limited by production capacity, sericulture constraints. Mulberry groves required specific soils and climates often found at higher elevations, not abundant in the lower Mekong Delta. Labor intensity, cocoon harvesting, rearing silkworms, and reeling threads demanded skilled hands and time, resources that agricultural zones could not spare during peak planting and harvest seasons. Trade risks, long-distance overland routes and maritime legs exposed silk consignments to raids, spoilage and price volatility, driving up costs for downstream consumers. Thus, while silk retained its allure, its availability waxed and waned with seasons, polities, and conflicts, leaving gaps for alternative textiles to fill. To economic pressures, when silk became too costly, price volatility and consumer substitution as silk prices rose, driven by political upheavals in Thai heartlands, competition from Chinese silks via Yunnan, and periodic bans on sericulture. Coarse but reliable rice fiber mats gained economic attractiveness. Barter ratios and early 14th century records. 1 bolt of silk traded for 10 mats plus a measure of fish. By the late 15th century, that ratio climbed to 20 mats, reflecting silk's escalating scarcity. Household budgets. Average agrarian families, subsisting on surplus rice sales of 2 to 3 baskets per season, could no longer allocate funds or barter equivalents sufficient to procure silk. In contrast, mats, the very product of rice stalk waste, were readily attainable. Fiscal policies and taxation. Local Mandarin administrations recognized the growing gulf between textile aspirations and material realities. In-kind tax reforms. Provincial tax edicts in the 16th century reduced silk tribute quotas by half for tributary villages, allowing partial settlement in rice fiber mats. This pragmatic concession alleviated peasant burdens and institutionalized mats acceptance as currency. Waqf endowments, temple wukfs endowments, adapted gift requirements. Monks and shrine caretakers began accepting rice fiber mats for bedding and ritual flooring. An early formalization of rice fiber textiles in sacred economies. Ecological constraints. When the land favored rice over mulberry, the agricultural priorities in the delta's rich alluvial soils and flood recession cycles favored rice above all. Attempts to introduce large-scale mulberry cultivation required for Saracle-Chimet, limited success. Flood vulnerability. Mulberry trees planted on low-lying floodplains frequently drowned during peak monsoon. In elevated planting terraces mitigated this but reduced achievable acreage, hampering meaningful cocoon yields. Soil salinity. In coastal zones near the South China Sea, saline intrusions made mulberry survival precarious, while rice culture over centuries adapted readily to mild salinity. Scarcity of skilled silk workers. When mulberry cultivation succeeded in upland fringes, processing cocoons demanded continuity of skills. Labor migration. Young laborers migrating to riverport cities or colonial plantations reduced available hands for silk reeling and weaving. Skill erosion without consistent practice. Fine silk techniques, dragging reels, controlling temperature in reeling houses, fell into disuse, further tipping the balance toward accessible rice fiber crafts for social imperatives. Crafting community practicality over prestige. While silk remained emblematic of high culture, rice fiber textiles offered practical advantages. Durability. Mats woven from pounded stalks, rice beaten during monsoon, immersion resisted mildew and insect damage, better than unwashed cotton blends of uncertain origin. Home production. Every household could produce mats, eliminating dependence on distant markets and building local self-reliance. Collective well-being and safety nets. Rice fiber weaving became embedded in communal survival strategies. Barter insurance. Families stocked mats as barter collateral, ensuring marketable assets even when crops failed or floods destroyed paddy fields. Labor sharing. Mat-making gatherings, synchronized village labor needs. Rice harvesters and fiber weavers swapped Work during planting or pounding peaks, weaving social solidarity into craft cycles. V. Shifting aesthetics from silk's luster to fiber's texture, evolving taste cultures as silk grew scarce. Elite and commoner tastes adjusted. Hybrid textiles. Silk weavers experimented weaving silk warps with rice fiber wefts, creating textiles that combined silk's luster with fiber's texture. A middle ground honoring tradition while economizing expensive threads. Fiber embellishments, artistic patterns emerged. Colored rice fiber mats dyed with plant mordants indigo, gamboge, turmeric featured bold geometric motifs, commanding attention through pattern rather than sheen. B. Ritual revalorizationism reconceived at the symbolic value of mats as sacred textiles. Temple legends celebrated mats woven from sacrificial stalks as embodiments of communal piety. Annual mat offerings replaced earlier silk offerings in many rural pagodas. Mats in life cycle ceremonies, from childbirth to marriage. Rice fiber mats featured prominently, gifted to newborns as first sleeping surfaces, to brides as dowry mats. Their centrality in everyday and ritual life. Vi. Unresolved thoughts. You contemplate the journey from silken splendor to pounded stalk, resilience from imperial gift economies to household self-reliance. Consider this question: how did the complex interplay of economic pressures, ecological realities, and social imperatives drive communities to embrace rice fiber weaving over silk? And what lessons does this shift hold for modern craft economies seeking balance between global prestige materials and locally sustainable resources? You examined how the Delta's ecological bounty made rice fiber mats a pragmatic substitute for fragile stilt-house. Soaring silk prices, flood-prone mulberry plantings, and communal resilience drove villagers to weave with what grew beneath their feet. Now we'll trace how weaving communities organized new economic frameworks around rice fiber, developing local and regional markets, innovating techniques to add value, and forging social strategies to share risk and reward. Through merchant cooperatives, craft fairs, and hybrid textiles, you'll see how the transition from silk to rice fiber spurred a reinvention of trade, technology, and social bonds that sustained villages for centuries. Village cooperatives and risk-sharing. Formation of weavers' guilds as silk faded from daily life. Rice fiber weavers formalized their associations, guild charters in the 16th century. Leading weavers drafted written charters on palm leaf defining membership, rules, production standards, and market quotas. These charters, ratified under banyan tree pavilions, bound members to contribute a portion of their mats to a communal reserve for times of crop failure or flood damage. Shared resources. Guilds pooled essential tools, high-quality spindles, pounding mallets, loom frames, ensuring all members, regardless of wealth, could meet production standards. Maintenance schedules and tool replacement protocols were jointly managed, reducing individual capital burdens. B. Credit and collective bargaining to navigate seasonal price swings. Metric-based credit. Guilds issued rice fiber bonds, certificates, entitling holders to fixed mat quantities at future dates. Traders accepted these bonds in lieu of physical mats, granting families immediate rice or fish on credit. At harvest, guild warehouses delivered mats against presented bonds, stabilizing household food security. Bulk sales and price fixing. Rather than sell mats individually, guilds negotiated bulk contracts with river merchants, agreeing to supply fixed mat volumes at preset prices. These agreements, often spanning multiple seasons, shielded weavers from sudden market downturns and allowed merchants to plan cargo loads more reliably. 2. Market expansion and craft. Inland and floating fairs. Building on traditional floating markets, rice fiber mats found new venues. Seasonal craft festivals, annual mats and threads fairs, held after the first mats festival, drew buyers from distant provinces. Villages set up thatched pavilions on stilted platforms above shallow lagoon beds, displaying mats alongside other local crafts, pottery, bamboo baskets, creating diversified marketplaces. Inland merchant circuits. Traders organized caravan routes, linking weaving hamlets to upland towns where silk still circulated. Along these routes, mats served as sleeping platforms for silk weaving itinerants, fostering reciprocal exchanges. Silk scraps for rice fiber, cordage, a barter system knitting together disparate craft economies. Evaluated innovations to distinguish their mats from cheap imitations. Dye and embellishment techniques. Weavers introduced natural dye borders, turmeric, day, gold trims, and deep indigo bands, applying plant-based pigments in hot steam baths to set colors. Some stitched simple embroidered motifs, water jackfruit leaves, or lotus petals onto mat edges, blending weaving and needlework crafts. Hybrid silk accents. Where silk remained accessible, weavers incorporated small silk warpens, gleaming strips running parallel to rice fiber wefts, creating starlight mats, whose subtle sheen evoked silk's prestige at lower overall cost. 3. Technological adaptations for improved loom designs. Faced with rising demand, frame loom extensions, traditional ground looms expanded into small frame looms with removable side panels, allowing broader mat widths up to 80 centimeters without sacrificing portability. These looms used tension-adjustable beams, wooden screws replacing lashings, permitting quicker setup and consistent tension control. Foot-operated shuttles, inspired by lowland cotton loom mechanics. Foot pedals controlled shuttle release, allowing weavers to maintain steady weft rhythms, boosting daily mat output by roughly 20%. Community workshops and skill exchange to disseminate innovations. Traveling artisan schools. Senior weavers led mobile workshops, moving between villages with small loom kits. They demonstrated advanced techniques to modern sequences. Hybrid weave patterns, ensuring even remote hamlets could adopt valuating methods. Knowledge-sharing festivals. Biannual weave knowledge exchanges gathered weavers for 3 days of demonstrations, competitions, and tool-making seminars. Journal-like palm leaf compendia updated each festival, recorded new patterns, dye recipes, and loom adjustments, serving as collective craft encyclopedias. IV. Social strategies. Balancing tradition and change. Apprenticeship contracts to secure skill transmission. Formal apprenticeship bonds. Families and guilds signed apprenticeship contracts stipulating training duration 3 years minimum. Skill benchmarks, for example, ability to weave a full patterned strip, and post-training obligations service for 1 season. Breaches carried communal penalties, loss of guild support, or public censure during festivals. Reciprocal sponsorship. Wealthier households sponsored multiple apprentices, covering their food and lodging in exchange for future mat training. Accessibility and incentivizing. Master weavers to mentor diligently. Gender and craftress fiber weaving evolved into a gendered but interdependent craft. Women's weaving circles. Women primarily managed loom work, organizing weaving mornings where they shared pattern innovations and negotiated market strategies. These circles functioned as cooperatives, fostering solidarity and collective decision-making. Men's support roles. Men handled fiber collection, pounding, and transportation, ensuring continuous fiber supply. They also managed guild negotiations with traders, expanding market reach. This division of labor balanced craft demands and reinforced family-based production units. Unresolved question: as you envision guild halls filled with patinated palm leaf charters, dye vats simmering across smoky communal sheds, and hybrid mats trading prestige for resilience. Consider this question: what can the rice fiber weaving community's blend of cooperative economics, technical innovation, and social contracts teach us about sustaining small-scale, resource-based crafts in a globalized marketplace where balancing authenticity, value addition, and ecological stewardship is ever more critical? You saw how rice fiber weaving rose to prominence as silk faded, driven by economic necessity, ecological realities, and social solidarities, and how communities forged new markets, innovated value-adding techniques, and wove cooperative frameworks to sustain their craft. Now, in this final chapter, we look at the forces that unraveled these systems, the modern efforts breathing new life into rice fiber traditions, and the key lessons for preserving locally rooted crafts in a global age. Tide of change, economic, ecological, and social unraveling, global textile markets and silk's resurgence by the late 19th century. Colonial integration of Southeast Asia into global trade networks dramatically shifted textile economies. Imported cotton and mechanized silk steamships and railways brought vast quantities of cheap machine-woven cotton from British India and mechanized silk from Java and China's industrial workshops. These textiles undercut both rice fiber mats and hand-woven silks on price and uniformity, eroding local markets despite mats' durability, changing consumer preferences. Urban elites and emerging middle classes, influenced by colonial administrators and missionary schools, equated printed cotton dress fabrics and glossy silks with modernity. Rice fiber mats, once bedrock of domestic life, began to appear outdated or provincial, hastening their decline in both rural and urban settings. Environmental pressures and resource depletion. Ecological transformations further strained rice weaving. Diminished flood inundations. Post-colonial dam and irrigation projects in the Mekong watershed regulated annual flood pulses, reducing the extended high water windows that traditional soaking pits relied upon. Without reliable natural soaking, fiber processing became more laborious and costly, discouraging large-scale mat production. Deforestation and tool scarcity. Logging concessions cleared riparian bamboo and hardwood groves used to make pounding mallets, loom poles, and water wardens' paddles. Artisans scrambled to source suitable woods or turned to inferior metals and plastics, undermining the tactile quality and heritage authenticity of rice fiber tools. See social dislocation and knowledge erosion. Modernization and migration disrupted craft transmission. Youth migration to cities with far-reaching roads and expanding urban opportunities. Younger generations left weaving villages for factory jobs and city schools. Apprenticeship systems dissolved, and elders' chants and oral compendia went unlearned, threatening the intergenerational relay of technical know-how. Aging artisan populations. By the mid-20th century, master weavers were octogenarians, recalling floods and festivals that no longer held communal resonance. without active practice and communal events like Weave Week or First Mats Festival. The social scaffolding supporting rice fiber weaving thinned until only a handful of practitioners remained. 2. Revival movements. Rekindling the rice fiber. Recent decades, a confluence of heritage awareness, eco-conscious markets, and digital connectivity has spurred revival efforts. Grassroots cooperatives and fair trade initiatives, women's weaving cooperatives in villages such as Piem, Kreso, and Kampong Kleang, women-led cooperatives formed to revive rice fiber weaving as collective enterprises, supported by microloans and NGO training. They re-established shared tool libraries, standard quality controls, and collective marketing strategies enabling members to command premium prices under fair trade labels. Market diversification, expanded product lines beyond floor mats to include table runners, wall hangings, lampshades, and woven pouches, integrating traditional patterns with contemporary design aesthetics. By collaborating with urban designers and eco-tourism lodges, they positioned rice fiber crafts in lifestyle segments, ensuring economic viability. B. Cultural documentation and educational history. Projects, local universities and cultural NGOs have recorded elders' narratives, spinning chants, festival songs, and process commentaries, archiving them in digital formats. These oral repositories, paired with video demonstrations of fiber extraction and weaving, serve as multimedia learning resources for new apprentices and researchers alike. School-based craft curriculum. Provinces along the Tonlé Sap and Mekong Tributaries pilot programs integrate rice fiber weaving into primary and secondary school curricula. Students learn seasonal ecological cycles, monsoon timing, field preparation alongside hands-on spinning and weaving, embedding craft knowledge with informal education and rekindling youth engagement. C. Technological synergies. Hybrid fiber research between craft NGOs and textile engineering departments has yielded experiments, blending rice fiber with modern biodegradable fibers such as bamboo lyocell or banana husk cellulose to develop new weaving materials that honor tradition while meeting contemporary performance standards. Digital marketplaces and virtual fairs. Artisans leverage e-commerce platforms and social media to showcase their crafts globally. Virtual weave-alongs, live streamed from communal halls, invite international audiences to participate in spinning sessions, purchase custom mats, and contribute to cooperative crowdfunding campaigns, transcending geographical isolation. 3. Enduring lessons. Weaving resilience into craft futures. The rice fiber weaving saga, from its flourish to fade and nascent revival, offers transferable insights for sustaining localized crafts. 1. Align craft with ecology lesson. Crafts rooted in local ecological rhythms, monsoon floods, soil cycles, plant life cycle, when environmental conditions are respected, and STEWARDED. Application, restoration of flood pulses, protection of riparian forests, and community-led watershed management underpin craft viability. In water-based economies. 2. Foster collective economies lesson. Cooperative structures, guilds, credit bonds, bulk market contracts amplify individual artisans, bargaining power and buffer market volatility. Application. Modern cooperatives can secure fair prices, share risks, and coordinate quality standards, enabling small-scale crafts to compete alongside industrial products. 3. Preserve intangible heritage lesson. Oral chants, apprenticeship bonds, and communal festivals encode technical protocols and social values essential for craft continuity. Application. Documentative initiatives, audio archives, video digital story maps alongside active intergenerational learning events maintain the living heritage beyond mere artifact preservation. 4. Embrace adaptive innovation lesson. Historic weavers balance tradition with innovation. Hybrid silk fiber mats, frame loom enhancements, dye experimentation, ensuring craft relevance across changing times. Application. Encouraging experimental blends of traditional and new materials, upgrading tool designs, and exploring novel product applications. Foster creative resilience for reflective resonance as you imagine elders' voices rising in melodic weave week chants, girls' spindles humming by lantern light, and cooperatives' boats drifting in digital live streams. Consider this question: what principles from the rice fiber weaving tradition, its ecological attunement, cooperative economies, ritual knowledge transmission, and adaptive innovation can guide us in nurturing and preserving other fragile localized crafts in a rapidly globalizing world? Sacred motifs on humble mats. Origins of weave symbolisms. Find how rice fiber weaving communities responded to floods, markets, and material shifts, and how the Mekong carried their mats to distant courts. Now look closer at the very patterns woven into those mats: the diamonds, blossom rosettes, serpent waves, and lotus medallions that transform utilitarian floors into sacred canvases. In this first section, we'll explore how religious beliefs, Hindu, Buddhist, and animist, infused everyday rice fiber weaves with spiritual meaning, turning each mat into a repository of protection, prosperity, and communal identity. By tracing the birth of key motifs, their diffusion through temple patronage, and their role in life cycle ceremonies, you'll see that for rice fiber weavers, every thread was an act of devotion, weaving as worship, the theological foundations, animist roots and protective patterns long before Indianized belief systems took hold. Early riverine communities practiced animist spirituality and honoring river spirits, forest guardians, and ancestral shades. Weavers channeled these beliefs into their work. Serpent wave Enga scallops. The Enga, a water serpent, was revered as master of floods and bringer of fertility. To invoke its protection, weavers began incorporating undulating scalloped borders along mat edges. Each curve echoes the serpent's sinuous back, symbolizing both the gentle ebb of post-monsoon waters and a protective boundary against malevolent forces. Forest vines, spirit creeper, winding vines and leaf motifs, abstracted into simple diagonal lines, represented forest spirits believed to dwell in embankment groves. These motifs, woven into central mat fields, served as veils channeling benevolent forest energy into household floras and everyday ritual of spiritual grounding. B. Hindu iconography in colonial weaves. With the expansion of Angkor's Hindu courts, Vaishnava and Shaiva symbolism permeated local crafts. Lotus medallion Padma centerpiece. The lotus, gnome of purity and cosmic creation, was rendered as a circular rosette at mat centers. Early examples show 8-petaled rosettes echoing the 8 directions woven in contrasting dyed bands. These lotus centers aligned mat users with the universe's axis, inviting calm, contemplative moods befitting temple precincts. Diamond indestructible grid. The Sanskrit Vajra, thunderbolt of Indra, and symbol of unbreakable resolve, found expression in diamond grid patterns. Small diamond arrays 2-3 diamonds per inch conveyed spiritual imperturbability. Courtiers commissioned mats with tight Vajra grids for use in council chambers. Their constancy believed to mirror righteous governance. To Buddhist reorientation, mandalas on mats as Mahayana and later Theravada Buddhism spread along river routes. New motifs and meanings emerged. A wheel of Dharma chakra border 8-spoked wheel. Around the lotus medallion center, weavers added embroidered or dyed 8-spoke wheels, symbolizing the noble eightfold path. This Dharma chakra border, usually executed in contrasting gamboge yellow or indigo bands, created a visual reminder that daily life, even seated on a humble mat, was a journey toward liberation. Sequential wheels in monastic settings. Long mats for meditation halls featured multiple sequential wheels along the length, guiding practitioners from mat's edge inward. An embodied pilgrimage echoing temple circumambulation. B. Bodhi. Leaf and stupa. Motifs Bodhi. Leaf insets small, leaf-shaped motifs drawn from the Bodhi tree under which the Buddha attained enlightenment. At loom intervals, these discrete insets, often left uncolored or in subtle ochre, invited users to reflect on awakening even during mundane tasks. Stupa outline bands, rectilinear chevrons alternating with triangular peaks, evoked stupa silhouettes. When woven in laurel-leaf twill, these bands suggested pilgrimage sites, reminding mat users of the monastic circuit around sacred reliquaries. 3. Syncretism and local variation. A Khmer folk Buddhist hybrid designs in many villages. Beliefs blended. Guardian, lion singer corners, borrowed from temple lintels. Stylized lion heads marked mat corners, warding off evil. Weavers adapted the motif to coarser rice fiber by simplifying lion manes into symmetrical spikes easily rendered on ground looms. Ancestor grid Ngolon matrix. A loose checkerboard, known locally as Ngolon, represented ancestral realms. Placing mats with checkerborders under household altars facilitated offerings to forebears, an act reinforcing lineage continuity. B. Regional distinctions. While core motifs persisted, regional styles emerged. Northern Highlands, weavers near Luang, Prabang favored vertical tree of life motifs flanking central lotus rosettes reflecting hill forest cosmology and the kingdom's Buddhist monastic emphasis. Delta plain variants. Delta weavers accentuated serpent wave borders with multiple scallop rows 4-6 symbolizing layered protection against both floods and malevolent spirits. 4. Ritual uses. Mats in life's passages. A. Birth and childhood newborn nest mat. Special, small mats, woven with dense lotus and wheel patterns, cradled infants during naming ceremonies. The intricate motifs were believed to anchor children in spiritual virtues from the outset. First steps. Mat. Larger mats featuring full Dharmachakra grids marked a child's first upright steps, embodying the journey toward ethical maturity. B. Marriage and house blessings. Duari mats. Brides received sets of 3 mats, a central lotus diamond mat for the bridal chamber, flanked by serpent wave pattern mats for communal spaces embodying purity, resolve, and protection in new households. House spirit offering before moving into new homes. Matrons placed mats with Bodhi inset borders at entryways and offering to dwelling spirits seeking harmony and warding off discord. See funerary and memorial shroud mats simplified. Uncolored mats woven in coarse twill served as shrouds, their diamond grids symbolizing resilience in face of impermanence. Ancestor commemoration. On memorial days, villagers unfurled family motif mats in communal halls, conducting mat scrub rituals, act symbolically renewing familial bonds across worlds. V. Unresolved thought. As you trace lotus centers, Dharma chakra borders and naga wave edges across countless humble mats. Consider this question. How did the infusion of animist, Hindu, and Buddhist symbolism into everyday weaves transform utilitarian mats into living mandalas, reminding users that even the simplest craft is a potent conduit for devotion, protection, and communal identity? You learned how animist serpents, Hindu lotuses, and Buddhist wheels found their way into rice fiber weaves, turning humble mats into talismanic objects woven with layers of meaning. Now, we delve into how these divine patterns were produced at scale, how temple and court patronage shaped motif standardization and innovation, and how teaching methods and material constraints influenced the transmission of sacred designs across generations and regions. Standardizing the sacred guilds, patrons, and templates. Weaver guilds and motif authority. By the 17th century, rice fiber weaving in delta villages had become organized into formal guildsprifau, which regulated both technical standards and symbolic registers. Motif registers. Guild chapters maintained palm leaf motif registries listing approved sacred patterns: the naga scallop, 8-petaled lotus, dharma wheel, bodhi leaf, and guardian lion. Each entry included a small charcoal sketch and a set of dye-color guidelines. For example, lotus rosettes in gamboge yellow, wheel spokes in indigo to ensure recognizable symbolism across workshops. Design examiners at annual guild festivals. Master weavers served as design examiners. They inspected sample mats submitted by journeymen, scoring accuracy of motif proportions. For example, the lotus's petal-to-circle ratio of 1:3 and fidelity of color boundaries. Mats achieving top marks received a small embroidered seal of sanctity, in one corner a gift of communal recognition, and a sales draw at markets. B. Temple and court patronage. Major, temple and provincial courts commissioned mats for ceremonial and diplomatic use, creating centers of motif refinement. Temple workshops in Angkor and Ladder at Wat Phnom in Phnom Penh. Temple weavers, monks or nuns operated specialized weaving houses adjacent to sanctuaries. These ateliers developed elaborate ritual mats, multi-wheel meditation carpets spanning the width of ordination halls, where central dharma wheels measured precisely 8 spans in diameter. Apprentices learned by tracing chalkboard outlines on damp mats before weaving, ensuring precise geometry. Royal commissions, provincial governors, and minor princes ordered mats for palace antechambers and banquet pavilions. Their requirements included hybrid designs: lotus rose medallions, framed by naga waves and bound by diamond grids reflecting royal authority over both spiritual and temporal realms. Court weavers added precious silk or metallic threads at motif centers to catch candlelight, elevating otherwise muted rice fiber mats to statements of rank and cosmological order. To tools of the trade: templates, dye stencils, and weaving guides. Motif templates and loom markings to reproduce sacred designs accurately. Weavers employed a range of aids: wooden carved templates for large central motifs, lotus, rosettes, dharma wheels. Artisans carved wooden stencils about 30 to 50 centimeters in diameter. These stencils, pressed onto damp mat surfaces or used to align warp spacing, guided weavers in establishing the motif's baseline threads. Colored warp markers: master weavers pre-dyed warp threads at key intervals every 10 or 20 centimeters with a small dot of indigo or gamboge before warping. These markers corresponded to motif boundaries, enabling weavers to shift to pattern weft sequences at precisely the right spot on the loom. Dye and chamfer techniques: while rice fiber absorbs dyes unevenly compared to cotton or silk, weavers perfected methods for crisp motif delineation. Resist modern chamfering: weavers applied rice-based resist to motif edges hand-drawn or stenciled before submerging mats in dye vats. After dyeing, the resist peeled away, leaving soft cream motif lines against deep-hued backgrounds. This technique produced subtle, gently blurred outlines characteristic of rice fibers. Coarse weave, steam fixing chambers. Dye fixation occurred in small bamboo steam chambers built beside hearth areas. Mats rolled around perforated cylinders, received even steam and heat, setting dyes more permanently than cold bath immersion. Time-honored recipes called for layered steaming: 10 minutes at low intensity to set madder reds, 20 minutes at higher heat for indigo blue fixation. 3. Transmission of symbolic knowledge: apprenticeships and oral lore. Apprenticeship models sacred motif knowledge so critical to ritual efficacy passed through intimate master lineages. Oath rituals: before formal teaching began, apprentices recited an oath of the pattern keeper at the village shrine, promising to preserve motif integrity and not divulge sacred patterns to outsiders. Breaking this oath carried both guild-imposed fines and folkloric curses, taught sternly by masters to impress the motif's sanctity. Shadow weave learning: apprentices started by weaving motif shadows, simple outlines without color on scrap loom frames. Only after mastering accurate proportions did masters allow them to tackle full dye and color sequences, ensuring that motif precision preceded dye complexity. B. Oral chants and mnemonic verses to embed pattern sequences in memory. Weavers composed short chants, pattern chants. For example, a lotus medallion chant, 8 to 6 petals mix, Wheel spokes turned dharma discern mapped petal counts and spin directions, recited softly as shuttle passed. The chant served as both mnemonic and meditative mantra. Festival recitations during weaving festivals. Villagers performed caland response recitations of motif lore. Guardian lion at mat's four-corner stand, emphasizing the symbolic position and protective function of motifs. IV regional variations and cross-cultural influences. While core sacred motifs persisted, local aesthetics and external influences produced distinct regional styles. A delta plain elaborations. Deep scallop rose delta weavers developed multi-row naga borders, often for concentric scallop bands believed to amplify protective power. Each scallop's depth to weft threads in height was governed by a ritual decree, ensuring consistency across villages. Floral filigree in sets to fill the negative spaces between diamonds and waves. Delta artisans wove tiny cross-hatched rosettes, water lily pads aiding both aesthetic richness and symbolic references to aquatic abundance. B. Hill tract simplification. Stylized botanical motifs in upland areas near Luang Prabang or Chittagong influenced northeastern Thailand. Weavers abstracted lotus and bodhi leaf shapes into simple chevrons and angular arcs, reflecting both coarse rice fiber imitations and animist reverence for mountain flora. Interwoven Thai patterns. Trade and migration brought Thai geometric motifs, swastika grids and curving flame patterns into local weaves, generating hybrid designs that fused Lao Thai and Khmer symbolic vocabularies. V. The mat as mandala, ritual deployment and everyday placement in sacred spaces. Ordination halls and meditation chambers. Large dharma wheel mats, precisely aligned to cardinal directions, underpinned monk ordination sessions. Their central wheels were used as focal points during guided visualizations of the Eightfold Path. Shrine approaches. Narrow naga-bordered mats lined stairways leading to village pagodas, symbolically guiding devotees under serpent protection toward temple sanctums. B. Domestic rituals and everyday invocations. Morning blessings at dawn. Households placed bodhi leaf in sets facing the rising sun, an act of daily homage bridging home and monastic practice. Cleansing and reconsecration. Exposed to foot traffic and riverine dust, underwent quarterly watery consecration rites, soaked in scented canal water, hung in temple courtyards for chanting, then returned home renewed in both fiber and symbolism. Unresolved questioners. You trace stained paste, resist lines of petaled lotuses and echo ancient pattern chants in your imagination. Consider this question. How did the intricate interweaving of animist, Hindu and Buddhist motifs within every mat's warp and weft endow rice fiber textiles with layers of sacred meaning? And what might this teach us about embedding symbolic depth into the everyday objects of our own lives? Oh, you explored how rice fiber weavers translated animist serpents, Hindu lotus medallions, and Buddhist dharma wheels into the very fabric of everyday mats. How guild charters, temple patronage, wooden templates, and apprenticeship oaths preserved motif integrity across centuries and regions. Now, in this concluding chapter of Story 7, we trace the forces that unraveled these sacred weave traditions: global market pressures, ecological change, and social transformation. Then, we spotlight modern efforts to revive patterns on rice fiber textiles, and reflect on enduring lessons about embedding symbolic depth in the objects that surround us. The unraveling of sacred weaves. Market displacement and declining demand. Inundation by mass-produced textiles at steam-powered mills in British India and mechanized silk workshops in China and Java flooded Southeast Asian markets by the late 19th century. Cheap cotton prints and glossy silks eclipsed rice fiber mats. Even temple-commissioned mats faced competition from imported prayer rugs and mechanically embroidered carpets, undercutting local weavers on price and novel aesthetics, eroding ritual patronage. Courts and major pagodas, once key patrons of sacred mats, redirected endowments toward imported textiles deemed more prestigious. Guild records from the 1930s note dwindling temple commissions. Lotus border mats went unpurchased, while simpler, unpatterned mats persisted only for utilitarian use. B. Ecological and technical challenges. Flood regulation and fiber and post-colonial hydropower and irrigation projects tampered with natural flood pulses. Soaking pits once filled by seasonal ebb and flow lay dry or silted, producing brittle fibers that resisted fine pattern work. Weavers struggled to achieve the softness required for precise resist-eye outlines and template-guided motifs. Tool scarcity and knowledge, loss. Deforestation eliminated source woods for carving large stencils and loom frames. As masters passed, their palm leaf motif registries decayed in household shrines, temple-adjacent weaving houses closed, and the ritual context that had consecrated motifs vanished, leaving motif knowledge atrophied among remaining practitioners. C. Social dislocation. Urban migration. Youth migrated to cities for factory work, breaking apprenticeship lineages, without daily reinforcement of pattern chants and temple festival demonstrations. Sacred motif transmissions weakened. Generational memory gap. Elders, vivid recollections of patterned festivals and weaving oaths, survived only in fragmentary oral testimonies. Without communal festivals reinforcing motif repertoires, scattered mnemonic verses faded from village life. 2. Revival of the divine patterns. Cultural heritage initiatives. Digital motif archives. Universities and NGOs have digitized surviving palm leaf motif sketches and video-recorded master weavers tracing large-scale templates onto mats. Open access repositories now host high-resolution images of lotus medallions, naga scallops, and dharma wheels, complete with measurements, color codes, and weaving notes ensuring motif integrity for future generations. Museum-backed workshops. National Museum of Cambodia and the Chiang Mai Cultural Center sponsor periodic sacred weave residencies. Selected young artisans live on site for 6 months, learning both ancient pattern carving and resist-eye techniques under conservator supervision. These residencies culminate in public pattern unveilings, restoring community engagement with divine weaves. B. Community-based reclamation village pattern festivals in hamlets near the Tonlé Sap and along the Mun River. Villagers reinstate miniaturized festival of patterns. Central banyan trees host stencil-making demonstrations. Communal mat walls display resurrected designs, and elders recite pattern chants in evening lantern circles. These festivals revitalize oral lore and reinforce local identity tied to sacred motifs. Hybrid pattern products. Artisan cooperatives produce smaller everyday items, coasters, placemats, prayer cushion covers imbued with single iconic motifs, for example, a solitary lotus rosette or naga border. By lowering technical barriers and offering entry-level pattern projects, these cooperatives widen participation and build momentum toward full-scale mat revivals. See artistic innovations and global dialogues. Contemporary pattern interpretations. Designers collaborate with traditional weavers to reimagine divine motifs in new media. Silk fiber blends, natural dyed cotton canvas, and hand-printed block print fabrics. Lotus medallions stretch across scarves and fashion panels. Naga curves undulate along modern home textiles, keeping motif lineage alive in global design circuits. Cross-cultural exhibitions, international exhibitions, water and weave in Bangkok, sacred threads in Paris, mandalas of the Mekong in New York bring rice fiber pattern installations to metropolitan audiences, accompanied by VR experiences of village pattern festivals and hands-on stencil workshops. These exhibits draw new appreciation for rice fibers' sacred geometry. III. Enduring lessons in everyday sacredness. Journey of divine patterns from birth in animist rituals to near loss in emerging revival offers timeless insights. 1. Embed meaning in craft lesson. Sacred motifs enriched mats with layers of spiritual significance, transforming utilitarian objects into devotional canvases. Application. Modern designers and artisans can infuse everyday products, textiles, ceramics, furniture with locally resonant symbols, fostering deeper user engagement and cultural continuity. 2. Institutionalized pattern preservation. Lesson guild charters, temple workshops, and motif registries safeguarded motif integrity for centuries. Application. Establish community-governed pattern trusts that record, vet, and license traditional designs, ensuring ethical usage and protecting cultural heritage from unchecked commercialization. 3. Blend ritual and innovation lessons. Apprenticeship oaths and pattern festivals anchored motifs in communal life, while technical innovation, stencils, dye chambers, advanced precision. Application. Craft training programs can combine ritual-infused ceremonies, for example, oath-taking festival participations with modern pedagogies, digital stencils, VR pattern overlays, reinforcing both cultural values and technical skill. 4. Foster multi-scale networks lesson, temple and royal patronage. Amplified motif diffusion. Village cooperatives reigned in risk. Global exhibitions broadened awareness. Application. Integrate local craftspeople with national cultural institutions and international market platforms, creating multi-scale networks that sustain tradition, economic viability, and cross-cultural dialogue for reflective resonance. As you imagine the soft rustle of mats woven with serpent waves, the glow of lantern-lit workshops carving intricate stencils, and the hum of pattern chants echoing beneath banyan canopies. Consider this question: what everyday objects in your life, from textiles to tableware, might be transformed by embedding them with locally meaningful symbols, rituals, and community-governed pattern archives, thereby weaving sacred depth into the fabric of modern daily living? Steam and silk. The arrival of industrial textiles. As you've listened to devotional chants and watched buffalo-drawn carts ferry dyed mats along muddy paths, now picture flat-iron steamships pressing down river, railroads snaking through paddy fields, and foreign bales of machine-woven cloth arriving in Phnom Penh's docks by the ton. In the 19th century, colonial integration thrust Southeast Asia's textile traditions into a crucible of market competition unlike anything they had faced before. In this first section, we'll trace how the confluence of industrial production, Colonial trade policies and shifting consumer desires plunged local rice fiber and silk weavers into crisis, appending centuries-old craft economies and triggering adaptive strategies that would reshape both villages and imperial sea and Tennessee. The mechanized flood. Global textile production meets the Mekong. The rise of industrial mills. By the early 1800s, Britain's Industrial Revolution had unleashed mechanized cotton spinning in power looms across Lancashire and Bombay. Cotton's global surge. British mills churned out more than 400 million yards of plain and printed cotton cloth annually. By mid-century, their mills employed steam-powered engines, producing fabrics at labor costs impossible for hand weavers to match. Silk re-engineering in China and Java. New filatures and reeling works harnessed water and steam power to process silk cocoons at scale. Machines regulated reeling temperature and tension, generating smoother, more uniform silk threads than traditional reelers could spin, a quality prized by urban elites. B. Colonial networks and tariff incentives. France and Britain, after establishing colonial footholds in Indochina and Burma respectively, integrated regional economies into their mercantile empires. Preferential tariffs. French Indochina's customs edicts, set in the 1880s, imposed minimal duties on imported cotton and silk from metropolitan France and British India, while sometimes exempting European imports entirely. By contrast, locally produced mats and silk cloth faced tribute levies and export taxes up to 15%. Rail and steamship subsidies. Colonial authorities subsidized rail construction Phnom Penh Saigon, 1881 to 1885, and steamship lines along the Mekong, redirecting freight flows from flatboat villages to colonial ports. These networks carried machine-made cloth inland at half the previous cost of barge-borne, hand-woven mats to market saturation and consumer shifts. Urban demand for modern textile. City dwellers, colonial administrators, European merchants, emergent Asian bourgeoisies developed new aesthetic and functional demands. Printed calicos, brightly printed cotton fabrics, floral chintz, and geometric madras checks became symbols of modern fashion and domestic decor. Hand-woven mats, in muted earth tones, seemed archaic by comparison. Missionary and administrative dress codes. European schools and colonial offices mandated cotton uniforms and cotton-lined sarongs, replacing traditional silk or rice fiber garments. These institutional requirements steadily eroded local cloth-wearing customs. B. Price. Competition in weavers' decline, once commanding significant barter value. Rice fiber mats and hand-woven silks entered a death spiral. Price collapse. By 1900, a machine-printed cotton sarong cost the equivalent labor of one day's mat production, whereas the same labor once yielded 6 mats 2 generations earlier. Weavers found their crafts undervalued, incomes plummeting by 60% in just 3 decades. Demand dry up. Rural households began purchasing cheap cotton covers for floor and beds. Temples ordered imported prayer carpets. Even peasant children sought printed cotton story cloths over rice fiber. Educational mats signaling the near-universal embrace of industrial textiles. Early adaptive responses. Hybridization and niche carving faced with extinction. Some artisan groups sought to differentiate their products. Silk fiber fusion mats. Wealthier weavers wove limited silk warps into rice fiber weaves, marketing luxury mats to affluent city clients. Though pricier, these hybrid mats occupied a niche between coarse mats and pure silk rugs. Pattern-driven luxury, emphasizing sacred motifs. Gold fringed lotus medallions. Indigo dragons. Artisan entrepreneurs branded mats as spiritual or protective talismans, fetching premiums among devout temple patrons and urban collectors. B. Cooperative pressures and craft guilds. Collective price floors. Guilds attempted to set minimum sale prices, refusing to accept less than fixed piastre rates per mat. Enforcement proved difficult as import price undercuts drove some desperate members to violate guild decrees. Undercutting cooperatives from within. Timeline compressing in response to cotton's rapid low-cost churn. Weavers reduced inspection. Stages eliminating multiple dye-fixing steams and skipping resist modern steps to speed production. The resulting drop in quality, however, alienated loyal customers and damaged the craft's reputation. 4 unresolved pressure points. By the turn of the century, despite sporadic innovation and cooperative efforts, rice fiber weaving faced existential threats. How could communities, railroaded by global markets and undermined by tariff and transport policies, leverage centuries of embedded skill and spiritual heritage to withstand the onslaught of industrial textiles, and which adaptive strategies might have altered their craft's trajectory? You saw how the steam-powered mills of Europe and Asia, colonial tariff policies, and shifting consumer tastes flooded Southeast Asian markets with cheap mechanized cottons and silks, undercutting generations of hand-woven rice fiber mats and local silks. Now we turn to the weavers' determined responses, carving out specialty niches, invoking cultural pride and ritual authority, and experimenting with small-scale technical innovations. Through these survival strategies, you'll witness how rice fiber and silk artisans strove on against overwhelming odds to preserve livelihoods, maintain symbolic value, and adapt age-old techniques to a new economic order. I cultivating specialty niches, a ritual mats and temple commissions sacred occasion mandates, recognizing that ordinary mats could not compete with factory-made cottons. Temple authorities in Angkor, Odong and Battambang reinstituted mandates requiring hand-woven mats for specific rituals, ordination ceremonies, monastic retreats, and annual festivals. Weavers producing mats with the most exacting divine patterns, for example, multi-layer lotus medallions, sequential Dharma wheel rows, received preferential contracts and modest stipends from monastic endowments. Limited production runs. To maintain exclusivity, temple workshops commissioned limited edition mats, often fewer than a dozen per year, each signed with an embroidered monk's seal. These mats, rare and consecrated, commanded premium offerings of rice, fish, or coin, and reinforced the link between hand-woven ritual mats and spiritual merit. B. Luxury inlay and silk. Accidental warp insertion. Drawing on older hybrid traditions, master weavers re-emphasized silk inlays along mat borders and within central motifs. By substituting 10 to 20% of weft threads with locally sourced silks, often remnant bolts from urban markets, they created mats that visually bridged the gap between coarse rice fiber and pure silk textiles. Metallic and bead embellishments. Some artisans stitched small glass beads, metal sequins, or gold leaf remnants into lotus centers and dragon borders, transforming mats into shimmering statement pieces. Though labor-intensive and huctus, these embellished mats found buyers among colonial officials and affluent locals seeking authentic exotic decor. To cooperative organization and collective advocacy. A. Revival of guild structures. Guild charters facing rampant undercutting. Weaver collectives rewrote their charters in the 1890s to include provisions for craft certification. Guild leaders created weave certificates, vellum scrolls authorizing a mat as hand-woven, pattern validated by 3 master weavers. Members displayed certificates at market stalls, signaling authenticity and deterring counterfeit mats. Mutual aid funds, recognizing shared vulnerability. Guilds established small emergency funds financed by monthly member dues to support families hit by floods, crop failures, or migration losses. These funds underpinned a basic social safety net, strengthening loyalty to the guild and providing a buffer against economic collapse. B. Advocacy with colonial authorities lobbying for tariff relief in limited successes. Weaver delegates petitioned French colonial officials for reduced export duties on hand-woven mats destined for Vietnam's urban markets. A 1905 decree temporarily lowered export tariffs by half, boosting cooperative revenues modestly before being rescinded under metropolitan pressure to favor industrial textiles. Cultural patrimony appeals. Artisans framed rice fiber weaving as living heritage, an argument that found sympathetic ears among emerging preservationists in Saigon and Phnom Penh. Though not altering core economic realities, these cultural appeals laid groundwork for later heritage initiatives. 3. Technical innovation. Loom and process enhancements. Portable frame loom kits to reduce setup time and increase mobility. Some weavers adapted collapsible bamboo and canvas loom frames. These portable kits allowed traveling weavers to demonstrate craft at urban and rural fairs, extending market reach beyond traditional floating bazaars. Combined resisti and steam chambers. Building on earlier steam fixing, artisans devised compact dual-function vats, one side for resist application and dye immersion, the other for steam fixation within a single hearth-powered unit. This integration cut processing time by 30% and conserved precious firewood, small gains that eased production. BURDENSB material experimentation. Skewered rice fiber, seeking improved dye uptake. Some weavers experimented with salt-cured rice, stalk soaking fibers in brine harvested from Tonlé Sap edges. This treatment opened fiber pores, allowing richer color absorption without extended resist dwell times. Hybrid natural fibers. When bamboo and tick supplies dwindled, artisans incorporated cane and palm leaf veins into loom components and shuttle designs, materials that, while less durable, offered workable stopgaps and demonstrated craft resilience. For cultural resistance and identity assertion, festivals and public demonstrations. Heritage Weave Days. In the early 20th century, select towns hosted Heritage Weave Days, public events where master weavers showcased sacred pattern carving, resisti demonstrations, and mat weaving speed contests. These spectacles attracted local officials, tourists, and press coverage, raising profile and generating modest tourist income. Weaver Story Circles. Grassroots groups revived oral history sessions. Weaver Story Circles, where elders recited legends of ancestral weavers, taught pattern chants, and led apprentices through ritual oaths. These circles reanimated communal pride and reinforced ties between craft and cultural identity. Intellectual and artistic alliances. Collaborations with literati and artists. Some weaver cooperatives partnered with urban poets, painters, and playwrights to incorporate mat patterns into literary works, visual art, and folk theater. This cross-pollination elevated rice fiber weaving from marginal craft to subjective elite artistic discourse. Early ethnographic documentation. Anthropologists and colonial ethnographies, though often guided by Orientalist agenda, mats, patterns, and chants in field notes and museum collections, inadvertently preserving technical details that later guided post-colonial revivals, unresolved. Reflection. Despite these multifaceted survival strategies, niche ritual mandates, cooperative advocacy, technical tinkering, and cultural activism, and silk weavers faced relentless market forces that eroded their traditional lifeblood, yet their efforts to preserve pattern integrity, strengthen communal bonds, and innovate within resource constraints offer powerful lessons. In the face of overwhelming industrial competition and colonial policies favoring mass-produced goods, how might we today draw on similar grassroots cooperation, cultural resistance, and incremental innovation to protect and evolve vulnerable artisanal traditions? You saw how steam-powered mills and colonial tariffs flooded markets with mechanized textiles, and how rice fiber and silk artisans fought back with ritual niches, cooperative charters, technical tweaks, and cultural advocacy. Now, we conclude Story 8 by examining the final unraveling of pre-industrial weaving systems, spotlighting 20th and 21st century revival efforts, and reflecting on the enduring lessons for sustaining localized crafts in the face of global pressures. The final decline, exhaustion, and dispersal, shrinking communities and lost lineages, village depopulation through the early 20th century, successive waves of labor migration, first to colonial plantations and urban factories, later to wartime conscription and refugee flows, hollowed weaving villages. By mid-century, many once vibrant hamlets had fewer than half their pre-colonial households engaged in weaving. Lineage breaks, with elders passing and apprentices scattered, master-apprentice bonds frayed, palm leaf motif registries, rotted wooden templates were repurposed or discarded, and pattern chants, once sung nightly around hearths, fell. SILENTB, economic marginalization, final undercutting. Post-World War II import liberalization brought synthetic fibers, nylon carpets, and plastic mats at prices that hand weavers could not approach, eroding remaining sales to near zero. Shift to subsistence. Weaving became purely subsistence. Families spun occasional mats for home use or as minor barter items, but no longer as primary income sources. The social status of weavers diminished, and the last ritual commissions vanished. Seeds of revival, heritage, eco-markets, and digital platforms. Grassroots heritage movements, village cultural centers. Beginning in the 1990s, select communities established small cultural centers in restored pagoda halls where weaving was taught as living heritage. These centers hosted intergenerational workshops, pattern exhibitions, and evening chant and weave circles, re-embedding craft in communal life. UNESCO and government backing. Following UNESCO's 2003 Intangible Cultural Heritage Guidelines, national ministries of culture in Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand designated rice fiber weaving as endangered heritage. Modest grants funded template-making workshops, museum acquisitions of mats, and annual endangered weave fairs. Eco and fair trade. Ecosoism integration. Eco-lodges around Tonlé Sap and packs incorporated mat weaving demos into guest experiences. Tourists paid for hands-on sessions, purchasing mats as souvenirs, injecting direct revenue into village economies and raising global awareness. Fairtrade. Cooperatives affiliated with Fairtrade International and regional artisan networks established minimum price guarantees for hand-woven mats and silk scarves. By negotiating collectively, they secured stable orders from boutique shops and online marketplaces in Europe and North America. See digital preservation and innovation. Online motif repositories. Open access digital archives now host high-resolution scans of traditional motif registries, along with video tutorials on stencil carving and resist-eye techniques, ensuring pattern integrity beyond local memory lapses. Virtual weave-along platforms, artisans live-stream spinning and weaving sessions, teaching global audiences via social platforms. Participants subscribe to monthly weave-along kits delivering locally sourced rice fiber and dye packets, creating a hybrid digital physical revival model. 3. Enduring lessons for craft survival. The arc of colonial disruption through near extinction to 21st century revival distills key principles. 1. Integrate heritage with livelihood. Insight. Crafts survive when embedded in both cultural identity and viable economies. Action. Combine tourism, fair trade sales, and digital outreach to create diverse revenue streams that reinforce heritage value. 2. Cultivate cooperative governance. Insight. Collective charters, mutual aid funds, and certification schemes strengthen artisans' bargaining power and social safety nets. Action. Support cooperatives that manage quality standards, price floors, and emergency assistance, fostering communal resilience. 3. Leverage ritual and technology. Insight. Ritualized teaching oaths, festivals, and modern tools. Digital archives. Online marketplaces can synergize to transmit knowledge effectively. Action. Design apprenticeship programs incorporating ceremonial rites alongside digital documentation, ensuring both engagement and preservation. 4. adapt ecologically and economically in alignment with local ecology's flood cycles, fiber sources and adaptive innovation, hybrid fibers, portable looms underpin craft, longevity, action, promote sustainable resource management and ongoing technical experimentation to meet evolving environmental and market realities. 4. Reflective resonance as you envision the last patterned templates carved anew, the soft glow of lantern-lit weaving centers humming with internet streams, and cooperatives negotiating fair trade contracts across oceans, reflect on this in a rapidly changing world. How can weird craft communities and the institutions that support them balance reverence for tradition with the necessity of innovation, ensuring that even the humblest woven threads carry forward the cultural and ecological wisdom of their origins? The gathering storm prelude to departure youth. They witnessed how colonial markets and industrial textiles buffeted centuries-old weaving traditions. Now imagine the devastation of war tearing through villages, conscripting young spinners, and turning one's vibrant weaving halls into ghostly, empty frames. In this section, you'll follow the slow unraveling of rice fiber and silk weaving lineages as regional conflicts from French colonial pacification campaigns to World War II, civil wars, and the Khmer Rouge-era depopulated weaving hamlets, disrupted generational knowledge transfer, and transformed communal looms into silent relics. Colonial pacification and early disruption, 1880s-1940s. Military campaigns in the Delta. By the late 19th century, French colonial authorities had imposed direct rule over Cambodia's lower Mekong provinces to quell resistance among hill tribe insurgents and rural bandit bands, troop movements and requisitions. Columns of French Indochina tirailleurs and locally recruited Maharists scoured backwater hamlets for food supplies and porters. Weaving villages prized for their rice reserves found communal granaries requisitioned, leaving families resource-starved and unable to sustain labor-intensive mat production. Forced labor and road building under Corvée labor decrees. Able-bodied men aged 16 to 45 were conscripted seasonally to build military roads and railbeds. Their absence during harvest and pounding seasons meant that fiber-soaking pits lay unattended and pulp mills ceased operations, fracturing annual weaving cycles. World War II and Japanese occupation. The advent of World War II brought new dimensions of upheaval. Japanese grain requisition during the 1941-44 rice famine. Japanese occupation forces confiscated rice stalk byproducts, once fodder for village cattle and raw material for weaving to feed military livestock and produce fibers for aircraft. Villagers, deprived of both grain and stalks, saw fiber stocks plummet by 70%, halting weaving activity almost overnight. Guerrilla warfare zones, as Free French and Japanese proxy forces clashed in rural Cambodia. Weaving hamlets near Tonlé Sap became no man's land. Looms remained intact but idle, and weaver families fled temporarily to refugee camps along the Thai border, where cramped tents and mud floors precluded any meaningful craft work. 2. Indochina Wars and Rural Displacement. 1945 to 1975. A First Indochina War, 1946 to 1954. The struggle between Viet Minh cadres and colonial forces bled into Cambodia's border provinces. Safe zone evacuations. French officials declared protected zones in Takeo and Kampot provinces, forcibly relocating thousands of villagers to fortified camps. Traditional weaving houses raised on stilts were dismantled. Wooden looms transported into camps, often rotted, unused under thatched shelters. Loss of master. Weavers' master, spinners and elderly pattern keepers deemed too old for labor camps were often left behind only to be targeted by both sides as suspected informants. Many perished or fled, breaking the succession of motif chants and palm leaf registries they carried. Vietnam War spillover, 1955 to 1973. Cambodia's proximity to Vietnam drew it deeper into conflict. Bombing of border villages. American B-52 strikes on suspected Viet Cong sanctuaries in eastern Cambodia flattened numerous weaving hamlets. Entire sections of the Mekong's tributary network were rendered impassable, cutting off market access and isolating surviving weavers. Child soldier recruitment. Both Khmer Rouge recruiters and Lon Nor militia conscripted teenage boys, the next generation of spinners, into combat. With apprentices absent, household looms fell silent. Only a handful of aging women and children remained to tend soggy soaking pits and maintain dusty stencils. 3. Khmer Rouge era, year zero of craft annihilation. 1975 to 1979, a forced collectivization and village abandonment. Pol Pot's regime sought to eradicate all vestiges of tradition. Evacuation of towns in April 1975. Urban populations, including silkweaver quarters of Phnom Penh, marched to rural cooperatives. Weaving guild halls and temple ateliers were emptied. Looms abandoned or destroyed as symbols of bourgeois culture. Prohibition of private property or personal tools. Hand-carved templates, bamboo looms, pattern registries were confiscated. Artisans were instructed to relearn labor solely in rice cultivation. Craft practices were outlawed, imprinted as crimes against the revolution. cultural genocide and knowledge erasure. The Khmer Rouge's ideological purges decimated living repositories of motif lore, targeting of intellectuals and artisans. Master weavers, often literate in Pali or Khmer script for palm leaf pattern notes, were classified as intellectuals and executed or worked to death. With their passing, the chants, technique, nuances, and ritual contexts underpinning sacred pattern integrity vanished. Breaking of apprenticeship chains. Children were separated from elders, placed in Angkar youth labor camps. Any spontaneous crafting attempts were met with brutal enforcement. The intergenerational thread of knowledge transfer snapped completely. For the aftermath, a silent loom landscape by 1979, when Vietnamese forces overthrew the Khmer Rouge camp. Weaving heritage lay in ruins. Decimated weaver populations. Estimates suggest up to 90% of master spinners and weavers perished under starvation, forced labor, and executions. Only a handful of village elders emerged from the purges, traumatized and dispersing motif knowledge among refugee camps in Thailand. Abandoned workshops, weaving houses across the Mekong Delta remained empty. Bamboo pit structures collapsed. Stencils lay buried in overgrown courtyards. For a generation, the hum of spindles and the rhythm of shuttlecocks were heard only in fading memories. Unresolved thought as you reflect on how conflict, forced displacement, and genocidal policies extinguished centuries of craft. Lineage looms standing as empty frames and chants echoing only in survivors' dreams. Consider this question. In the face of such utter devastation, what mechanisms of cultural resilience and post-conflict restoration could have preserved even fragments of the rice fiber and silk weaving traditions? And how might these lessons inform efforts to protect other endangered crafts in war regions today? You witnessed the catastrophic unraveling of rice fiber and silk weaving lineages under colonial pacification, world wars, and genocidal regimes. Looms abandoned, master weavers lost, pattern chants silenced. Now, we follow the slender threads of survival, how displaced spinners and weavers in refugee camps and diaspora communities clung to their craft, improvising looms in bamboo huts, preserving mnemonic chants in whispered gatherings, and laying the groundwork for late 20th century revivals. Through stories of makeshift workshops, clandestine apprenticeships, and the first fragile reconnections with a broken homeland, you'll see how the indomitable spirit of weaving communities bore witness to cultural resilience amid devastation. A refugee camp looms, crafting in initial displacement and despair in the immediate aftermath of the Khmer Rouge collapse 1979 to 1981. Hundreds of thousands of Cambodians streamed across the border into Thailand. Refugee campsites like Koh Dang, Nun, Samet, and Saitu became temporary refuges, yet life there was defined by crowding, hunger, and the absence of familiar rhythms. For former weavers, the first weeks offered little hope for crafting. Scarcity of materials, rice fiber stalks were unavailable. Bamboo, though present in camp perimeters, was often stripped by newcomers for cooking fuel or shelter poles. Silk threads once prized were long gone, burned or confiscated in the final days of the regime. Psychological trauma, survivors bore the weight of lost families and cultural severance. The notion of sitting at a loom felt inconceivable amid the daily struggle for food and water. For many, the concept of weaving seemed like a luxury of the dead world, not of the living. Press and first stirrings of reconstruction. Yet, as camp populations stabilized into months, so too did the community psyche, and with it, a yearning for cultural anchors, gathering under bamboo awnings. Small groups of elders and a few surviving apprentices formed clandestine circles under the shade of bamboo awnings. They spoke softly of the old days, how to select stalks for uniform fiber, how to count warp lines by sound, the cadence of shuttlecocks. Their voices, hoarse from disuse, summoned half-remembered chants, fractured but recognizable. Improvised spindles and backstrap looms. Ingenious hands fashioned rudimentary drop spindles from empty soup cans and nails driven into wooden dowels. For looms, villagers lashed two forked sticks between a hut post and a wooden tent peg, stretching fishing net twine as a warp framework. These backstrap setups, though crude, allowed spinners to begin drafting fibers, initially using shredded plastic fibers from food packaging as stand-ins for rice stalks. See secret apprenticeships and intergenerational bonds. Recognizing that time was fleeting, small apprenticeship arrangements emerged, oath by campfire and the glow of communal kerosene lamps. Elders administered an informal oath of cultural guardianship to young learners. Though lacking temple sanctity, the pact hand-sealed with a drop of rice wine imbued the act of learning with urgency and moral weight. Shared meals as teaching moments over bowls of rice porridge. Elders demonstrated how to strip synthetic fibers to simulate the flow of soaked rice stalks, how to spin with finger draft techniques, and how to simulate resist dye patterns by tying small knots in plastic threads. Each morsel reinforced communal care, feeding bodies and feeding culture. Diaspora weaving hubs, preservation abroad, resettlement and craft, rebirth as refugee flows shifted to urban resettlement into camps in the United States. France, Australia, and Canada. Cambodian communities sought to retain their craft identity. Community centers and cultural clubs in Long Beach, California. Major Cambodian diaspora hub Khmer cultural associations rented small halls. A handful of former weavers set up sturdy frame looms donated by sympathetic local NGOs and taught weekly weave nights, where families brought donated fabric scraps, plastic strips, and any natural fibers they could source. Participation. Grandparents, parents, and children sat side by side. Elders narrated origin chants in Khmer, children echoed motif names in phonetic English, and parents translated technique steps for non-Khmer speaking spouses. These sessions rekindled communal pride and ensured that surviving pattern lore found new life in foreign lands. B. Hybrid material explorations. Confronted with radically different ecologies and material scarcities, diaspora weavers innovated recycled fibers and upcycling. Nylon fishing lines, plastic grocery bags cut into and synthetic upholstery threads became the raw material for mats, mirroring ancient resourcefulness in a modern context. While yielding coarser textures, they enabled practice of fundamental weaving techniques and kept the hands-on traditions alive. Integration of local textiles, silk scarves, surplus cotton, shirts, and even tea towels were deconstructed for yarn. Weavers spun and plied these into warps, experimenting with pattern additions that blended Khmer motifs onto American fabric. Backdrops creating visibly syncretic products that spoke of cultural fusion. See international exhibitions and awareness. Diaspora communities leveraged cultural events to share their craft. Annual Khmer New Year festivals, craft booths at festivals in Melbourne, Paris, and Ottawa displayed looms in action, offered mat weaving workshops, and showcased plastic fiber mats embroidered with lotus and wheel motifs. Visitors, Khmer and non-Khmer alike, left with cochineal-dyed wristbands woven in the backstrap style, carrying home a tangible fragment of heritage. Museum collaborations. The Smithsonian Folklife Festival, Washington, D.C. and Musée Duquesne, Branly, Paris invited diaspora weaving groups to present memory mats. Installations, rows of hybrid mats hung as tapestries, each captioned with personal refugee narratives. These exhibits spotlighted the interdependence of craft, memory, and survival, garnering international support and modest funding. 3 first steps toward home-based return of master weavers. In the early 1990s, as Cambodia stabilized, a few courageous masters returned. Repatriation and workshop reestablishment. Elder weavers, most in their 70s, journeyed back to villages such as Pim, Krasop, and Kompong Kling. There, with support from UNESCO and local NGOs, they reconstructed communal halls and rebuilt simple bamboo pit soaking facilities, reviving seasonal calendars for fiber preparation. Framing oral archives. Master weavers brought diaspora-made plastic mats and recorded chants, comparing them with local recollections to reconstruct lost patterns. Working alongside younger villagers who had never woven traditional mats, they painstakingly translated hybrid techniques back into rice fiber contexts and exercise in reverse engineering cultural memory. B. Cooperative frameworks and pilot projects. Weave councils and returned weaver villages. Village with councils formed bodies comprising elders, local officials, and NGO facilitators. Councils coordinated seasonal fiber gatherings, allocated loom access, and organized first post-war Weave Week ceremonies, modest revivals of the pre-colonial festivals that once marked communal rhythms. Pilot mat series. Cooperatives launched small pilot runs of rice fiber mats, 50 to 100 pieces, bearing reconstructed animist and lotus motifs, sold under the brand Threads of Memory to fair trade outlets in Panam, Pen, and Bangkok. Though modest in scale, these pilots proved viable, villages reported. Demand doubling within a year as heritage and tourism markets responded. For reflections on resilience through refugee camp ingenuity, diaspora hub solidarity, and tentative home-based reconnection. Rice fiber and silk weaving traditions prove that even under the most brutal of dislocations, cultural threads can persist. Key reflections emerge. Craft as cultural anchor. Despite starvation, forced labor, and terror, the impulse to weave endured, underscoring that craft is not mere livelihood but an anchor of identity and psychological solace in exile. Hybrid adaptation and core continuity. The use of plastic fibers and local textiles in diaspora contexts illustrated how adaptive material substitutions can sustain technique while core symbolic patterns and their attendant chants and odds provide continuity. Community networks across exchanges between diaspora weavers and returning elders demonstrated the power of transnational networks to transfer knowledge back home, blurring distinctions between exile and origin communities in service of craft revival. Unresolved questions. You envision secret weaving circles and bamboo shanties, diaspora-made plastic mats bearing lotus wheel motifs, and the slow return of master weavers to reclaimed paddy levees. Consider this question: what combinations of diaspora innovation, community solidarity, and home-based cultural reclamation are most essential for restoring a shattered craft tradition? And how might these insights guide efforts to revive other endangered cultural practices in post-conflict societies? You saw how war and genocide unraveled weaving traditions, forced evacuations, confiscated tools, aborted apprenticeships, and how fragile yet tenacious threads of craft survived in refugee camps and diaspora hubs, setting the stage for eventual homecoming and revival. Now, in this final chapter of Story 9, we trace the processes by which weaving lineages were painstakingly restored in post-conflict villages, the institutional and grassroots initiatives that reignited communal festivals and markets, and the enduring lessons about cultural healing and craft resilience that emerge from this painful yet hopeful chapter. The Long Road Home, re-establishing weaving community, return migration and village reconstitution, demobilization and land resettlement, 1980s-1990s as stability gradually returned after 1979. Families displaced by the Khmer Rouge trickled back to their ancestral villages. International relief agencies coordinated demining and rebuilt basic infrastructure at roads, communal wells, and primary schooling former weavers to reoccupy homesteads that had lain empty. Early returnees encountered overgrown fields and collapsed stilts under weaving houses, with donor-provided tools, hammers, machetes, nails. Villages cleared brush, reinforced posts, and re-erected thatched roofs. Looms lay stacked in corners. Many wooden parts had rotted, but survivors recognized the joinery techniques, recalling frame dimensions and beam lengths by memory. Reformation of Weave Week ceremonies in 1992. The first post-war Weave Week was held under a hastily repaired banyan pavilion without formal guild charters. Villagers improvised. The eldest surviving master weaver lit the communal hearth, spoke a blessing chant taught in exile, and invited all able hands old and young to spin and weave together through the season. Though output was modest, the festival reinstated the social bond between elders and apprentices, reviving seasonal rhythms that defined communal life. Revival of apprenticeship and knowledge transmission. Village mentorship programs, gaps in generational knowledge. Local NGOs and returning elders launched mentorship pairings, temporarily lodging young adults in elder homes, providing food stipends in exchange for daily spinning and dye work practice. These home-based residencies, bridging ages and trauma divides, restored personal bonds alongside technical skills. Reconstruction of pattern. Repertorious master weavers collaborated with diaspora weavers to compare plastic fiber prototypes and surviving palm leaf sketches, reconstructing motif guides. Village workshops printed fresh wooden stencils. Lotus Naga scalloped armor wheeling, carved plywood, distributing sets to every loom station. The visible templates on workshop walls anchored communal pattern memory, replacing lost palm leaf books. Institutional support and heritage recognition. Government and international initiatives in SEO Cultural Heritage Designation 2005. Following a successful advocacy campaign by Cambodian Ministry of Culture and international partners, rice fiber weaving was inscribed on the National UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage roster. This designation unlocked small grants for village cultural centers, funded stipend programs for master weavers, and mandated inclusion of weaving in provincial school curricula. National Weaving Resource Centers. In Panam, Pen and Seam Reap, the ministry established weaving resource centers facilities, housing digital motif archives, demonstration looms, dye laboratories, and oral history booths. Master weavers were hired as instructors, giving regular workshops for tourists, students, and community artisans. These centers functioned as urban hubs, reconnecting rural traditions to national identity and economic opportunity. Grassroots. Cooperatives and social enterprises. Loom and River Cooperative Network Est. 2010, a federation of 8 village cooperatives along Rio Tonlé Sap formed Loom and River, a social enterprise that pooled mat production, standardized quality controls, and negotiated fair trade contracts with boutique hotels and global e-commerce platforms. By aggregating small producers, the network achieved economies of scale, securing stable purchase orders and reinvesting profits in tool libraries and youth training scholarships. Cultural tourism. Partnership. Sakota operators integrated weave with us packages into river cruises, offering guests half-day immersive workshops with village masters. Revenue shares flowed directly to cooperatives, while guests purchased mats at premium prices. These tourism linkages generated essential cash inflows, validated cultural pride, and provided direct market feedback to weavers. 3. Innovations in hybrid creativity, material experimentation and sustainability. Reforestation for craft resilience. The need for reliable toolwood. Cooperatives initiated community nurseries of bamboo, jackfruit, and local hardwoods. After 5 years, craftsmen harvested poles under sustainable management plans, ensuring future generations would have native materials for loom frames, mallet heads, and templates. Biodegradable fiber blends. Collaborations with university textile labs yielded small-scale experiments blending rice fiber with banana husk cellulose and lotus stem threads. These biodegradable composites improved mat flexibility and dye uptake, expanding product possibilities to eco-friendly bags, lampshades, and interior panels, diversifying income streams beyond traditional mats. digital and pedagogical integration, apprenticeship platforms building on diaspora livestream models, cooperatives developed closed group, e-learning platforms where apprentices upload daily practice, videos for critique by masters bridging geographical distances and accelerating skill refinement, digital badges track competencies, spinning, warping, pattern weaving, creating transparent skill pathways for both rural and urban learners. Interactive pattern apps. A non-profit-backed mobile app offers 3D rotatable models of sacred motif stencils. Users can trace on-screen guides or project patterns via Bluetooth laser pointers onto loom warps. This technology combines tactile tradition with digital precision, ensuring younger weavers can reproduce intricate designs even without wooden stencils on hand for healing wounds through craft day. Psychological and community well-being. Truman-formed weaving circles drawing on art therapy research. Cooperatives host healing circles where weaving serves as communal therapy. Survivors of conflict gather to spin and weave while sharing personal stories. The rhythmic motions of shuttle passing and chanting traditional pattern chants catalyze emotional release, rebuild trust, and foster collective resilience. Intergenerational reconciliation weaving festivals now include formal story exchange sessions. Elders recount pre-war weave. Youth share journeys through camps or diaspora. By weaving side by side, generations confront painful legacies, acknowledge losses, and reaffirm shared futures, transforming looms into vessels of communal healing. B. Spiritual renewal and cultural. Continue tire consecration rituals in many villages. Restored mats undergo ceremonial reconsecration, cleaned in scented canal waters, hung beneath temple stupas for blessing chants, then returned as household floors. These rites reaffirm mats' sacred status and link present craft practice to ancestral spiritual commitments. Festival of Remembrance. An annual festival of the loom now commemorates both the dead and the living. Mat walls display portraits of master weavers lost to conflict. Communal mats bear dedications woven into borders, and weavers chant reconstructed motif chants in honor of ancestors. This festival weaves together memory and aspiration, ensuring that craft embodies both reverence for the past and hope for the future. The enduring lessons in post-conflict craft revival. The resurrection of weaving traditions in post-war communities illuminates universal principles. Cultural repair through practice. Lesson craft practice can anchor psychological and social healing, providing hands-on continuity amidst rupture. Application. Post-conflict recovery programs should integrate traditional crafts as therapeutic interventions, fostering both economic and emotional rehabilitation. Diaspora homeland synergies. Lesson exiled artisans preserved and adapted craft knowledge, which when repatriated, fueled vibrant home-based revivals. Application. Facilitate transnational craft networks, valuing diaspora innovations as assets in cultural restoration and economic development. Hybrid governance models. Lesson collaborative governance combining state recognition, NGO support, and cooperative self-management anchors sustainable revival. Application. Craft heritage strategies should involve multi-stakeholder partnerships, ensuring resources, legal protections, and grassroots agency align for lasting impact. Adaptive evolution rooted in memory. Lesson revived weaving fused ancestral patterns with modern materials and technologies and tradition while embracing innovation. Application. Encourage iterative craft adaptation respecting core symbolic frameworks while exploring new materials, markets, and educational modalities to maintain relevance. Vi. Reflective resonance as you imagine village halls echoing once more with Shaju collects healing circles humming with chant, and hybrid mats flowing from bamboo nurseries to global design showcases. Consider this question. In restoring a craft tradition shattered by war and genocide, what combinations of memory, innovation, and collective will are most powerful, and how might these insights guide us to protect and revitalize other endangered cultural practices in the aftermath of conflict? Seeds of renewal from fragmented workshops to cooperative vision in the wake of war and displacement. Rice fiber weaving in Cambodia and its neighbors appeared all but extinguished. Yet by the early 21st century, a remarkable resurgence driven by nostalgia alone, but by intentional cooperation, social enterprise, and sustainable design. This revival has reshaped entire villages, creating new livelihoods, reinforcing ecological stewardship, and restoring a sense of shared heritage. In this first section of Story 10, we'll explore how local leaders, NGOs, and international partners came together to seed modern craft cooperatives, mapping the foundational steps of organizing artisans, rebuilding infrastructure, and crafting a cooperative vision that balanced tradition with innovation. Through close examination of the formative years pilot projects in Pim, Krama Sap, and Kampong Kling, you'll see how fragmented workshops evolved into robust enterprises, anchoring rice fiber weaving in the economic and cultural life of post-conflict communities, i.e. the context for post-conflict economic realities. By the late 1990s, Cambodia's rural economy faced multiple challenges: agricultural pressures, repeated floods and droughts, compounded by limited access to credit and volatile rice prices, left farming communities struggling for stable incomes. Urban migration with few local employment options, young people continued migrating to Phnom Penh or abroad, draining villages of potential apprentices and further eroding communal cohesion. Tourism growth. Meanwhile, tourism in Cambodia soared. What drew increasing numbers of international visitors seeking cultural experiences, creating new market opportunities for authentic handicrafts. Recognizing these dynamics, visionary local leaders and development partners began to ask, could the deep well of weaving heritage be harnessed not as a museum relic but as a living economic engine for rural renewal? BNGO and government partnership. In 2003, a consortium of Cambodian NGOs led by the Cultural Heritage Alliance and the Ministry of Commerce launched a strategy to pilot community-based cooperatives. Village selection criteria. Sites were chosen based on a combination of surviving weaving expertise, proximity to sustainable fiber sources, rice paddy residues, accessibility to tourism corridors, and existing social cohesion. PM Krasaup Kompong Chinang Province and Kompong Kling Siem Reap Province emerged as strong candidates. Both had small groups of returnee master weavers, functioning village leadership councils, and nascent ecotourism lodges nearby. Capacity grants. Initial seed grants funded the construction of multi-purpose weave halls, thatched structures with raised bamboo floors, integrated soaking pits, and communal looms. Grants also covered basic equipment, pounding mallets, wooden templates, dye vats, and solar-powered lighting systems to extend work hours while conserving wood. Training and technical assistance. International textile experts from UNESCO's Intangible Cultural Heritage Unit provided week-long workshops on cooperative governance, financial management, and quality control. Simultaneously, local master weavers led intensive skill refresher courses for younger villagers, ensuring robust technical foundations. II. Cooperative formation and governance. Drafting cooperative charters. Successful collective organization depended on clear, locally appropriate governance structures, member eligibility and responsibilities. Charters defined membership criteria. Families with at least one person any age capable of spinning, weaving, or processing fiber could join. Members committed to contribute a minimum weekly quota of mats or related products to the cooperatives. Central stock ensuring baseline production and equitable labor sharing. Decision-making bodies. Each cooperative established an elected council of 5, a president, secretary, treasurer, quality supervisor, and youth liaison. Elections occurred annually at Weave Week gatherings, honoring traditional seasonal markers while embedding democratic accountability, profit sharing, and reinvestment policies. A sliding profit share model allocated 60% of net revenues to individual producers based on output and quality, 30% to a community fund for apprenticeships, social support, and environmental stewardship, and 10% to cooperative operations maintenance, marketing, and administration. Building trust and shared vision. Transforming competition into collaboration required cultural work. Weave cooperative pledges. At the inaugural Weave Week after charter ratification, members gathered under the Banyan Pavilion to recite a cooperative pledge, blending older pattern oaths with new commitments to shared prosperity, environmental responsibility, and cultural transmission. The ritual, led by the eldest master weaver, invoked ancestral witnesses and sealed cooperative solidarity. Peer learning. Circles. Weekly weavers' circles provided forums for members to share technical tips, collective problem-solving, and market intelligence. A rotating facilitator, often the quality supervisor, guided discussions on challenging batches, new pattern trials, or dye recipes, fostering a culture of open knowledge exchange. 3. Reconstructing the production chain. Sustainable fiber supply. Ensuring a reliable, eco-friendly fiber source was critical. Cooperative managed paddies. Members agreed to leave a standardized fiber strip the outer 20 centimeters of rice stalks at harvest time. These strips, instead of being burned or discarded, were collected centrally. This practice both reduced air pollution and guaranteed cooperatives a consistent feedstock. Communal soaking pits upgrade. Traditional bamboo-lined pits were retrofitted with low-impact concrete lining, preventing excessive water seepage and enabling precise control of soak durations. Solar-powered water pumps circulated fresh canal water into pits during dry spells, extending the processing season beyond natural flood windows. Quality control and standardization. Maintaining consistent product standards proved essential for market credibility. Quality supervisor role. The elected quality supervisor conducted daily inspections of raw fibers. Flexibility, cleanliness, spun yarns, tensile strength, uniformity, and woven mats. Thread count, pattern accuracy, edge integrity. Mats passing inspection received a small stamped seal of the cooperative, an assurance of authenticity and workmanship. Technical manuals and record keeping under the guidance of village secretaries. Cooperatives maintained simple ledgers recording batch numbers, production dates, fiber sources, and quality feedback. These records, though modest, enabled troubleshooting of recurring defects and supported traceability for buyers demanding ethically sourced goods. IV. Market development and branding. Defining a market niche with production stabilized cooperatives turned to crafting a compelling brand. River Roots identity. Drawing on the Mekong's symbolic power and local ecological stewardship, cooperatives adopted the name River Roots Handweave. Their logo, a stylized Naga-scale border encircling a lotus blossom, evoked both sacred heritage and environmental connection. Product diversification. Beyond floor mats, members developed complementary items, placed mats, wall hangings, lampshades, and small tapestry panels, all featuring iconic motifs in limited heritage editions. This diversification allowed cooperatives to target both home decor and artisan gift markets, balancing high-end and everyday price points sales channels and partnerships. Reaching buyers required multi-pronged outreach. Local tourism alliances, guest houses, and river cruise operators along Tonlé Sap incorporated cooperative workshops into guest itineraries. Visitors could tour weave halls, try basic spinning, and purchase products directly, creating immediate retail sales and deepening customer engagement. Urban retail pop-ups in Panam, Pen, and Siem Reap. Cooperatives partnered with boutique retailers to host River Roots pop-up events. Showcases timed to coincide with peak tourist seasons. These pop-ups included live weaving demonstrations, pattern exhibitions, and cooperative representatives who shared weaving stories, building brand narrative and premium positioning. E-commerce launch, with technical assistance from a social enterprise. Incubator cooperatives launched a simple e-commerce platform riverrootsweave.org, offering direct-to-consumer sales, limited edition pre-orders, and behind-the-scenes video content. Although international orders remained modest initially, the platform laid groundwork for future global expansion. Early impacts and emerging challenges. Socioeconomic benefits. Within 2 years of formation, 2005 to 2007, cooperatives recorded notable gains. Increased household income. Average weaver household saw a 35% rise in annual income compared to farming-only models, enabling reinvestment in children's education, small livestock purchases, and home improvements. Youth engagement. Apprenticeship slots filled rapidly, with village youths viewing weaving as a viable pathway rather than a relic of crisis. Weavers reported that 60% of apprentices were under 25, reversing decades of demographic decline. Operational and market challenges. Still, the road ahead posed hurdles. Raw material bottlenecks. An unusually severe drought in 2008 reduced rice harvest yields and stock availability, forcing cooperatives to purchase rice fiber bundles from neighboring communes at premium rates. The experience underscored vulnerability to climatic variation and the need for strategic fiber reserves. Quality versus quantity tension. Growing tourist demand led some members to accelerate production, occasionally compromising pattern precision and finishing quality. Quality supervisors intervened with refresher training, but balancing volume targets and artisanal standards remained an ongoing management priority. Unresolved thought. As you envisioned weave halls humming with spindles, cooperative councils debating pricing policies under banyan tree shade, and River Roots hand weave mats adorning ecolodge verandas reflect on this question: what foundational elements, from shared governance and sustainable fiber management to brand, storytelling, and market partnerships, are most critical in transforming a fractured craft into a thriving modern cooperative? And how might these lessons guide the revival of other heritage crafts in similar contexts? You saw how River Roots handweave cooperatives emerged, from post-conflict ruins drafting charters, rebuilding soak pits, and forging a distinctive brand that married heritage with markets. Now, we follow their evolution over the next 5 years, how they scaled production without sacrificing quality, deepened socioeconomic impacts in their communities, navigated environmental challenges, and laid groundwork for long-term sustainability through strategic partnerships and continuous innovation. Scaling production with integrity. Expanding cooperative reach. Satellite weave halls. By 2010, River Roots chartered to satellite cooperatives in neighboring villages Candle, Stung, and Kampong Laung, each equipped with a weave hall, communal soak pits, and template libraries. Shared governance structures replicated the original cooperative's constitution, enabling consistency while reducing travel burdens for members. Membership growth and onboarding. Within 3 years, membership grew from 45 households to over 100. To maintain craft standards, the cooperative instituted a tiered onboarding system. New members entered a 6-month probationary apprenticeship, completing standardized spinning and weaving milestones, before gaining full production quotas and profit share rights. Maintaining quality at scale. Enhanced quality assurance protocols. The quality supervisor role expanded into a small quality committee of 3 rotating master weavers. They conducted weekly production audits, sampling 10% of mats for pattern accuracy, dye consistency, and finish quality. Non-conforming pieces were documented, and corrective workshops scheduled. Digital record-keeping cooperative staff digitized. Quality records photographing each batch's best and worst samples and tracked defect rates over time. Data dashboards helped identify persistent issues, for example, uneven dye uptake in rainy season, and guided targeted training sessions. 2. Deepening socioeconomic impact. A. Strengthening community welfare. Investing in education and health. 30% of cooperative net profits funded a community fund. Over 5 years, this fund provided scholarships for 65 children to attend secondary school. Health clinics. 2 mobile healthcare days per year. Staffed by visiting nurses. Infrastructure repairs. Upgrades to village wells and footbridges. Empowering women and youth while weaving remained gender inclusive. Cooperatives emphasized leadership roles for women. By 2012, women held 4 of 5 council positions. Youth liaison roles ensured teenage members influenced cooperative decisions and led peer-to-peer training. B. Diversifying income streams. Value-added product lines beyond mats and home textiles. Cooperatives launched Weavers Looks Limited Edition, silk fiber fusion wall tapestries for art collectors. Eco accessory range, hand-woven tote bags, laptop sleeves and scarves marketed online under a companion brand. River Roots Essentials service offerings. Weave with Us experiences expanded into multi-day homestays where travelers stayed with weaving families and learned full filtering of fiber to finished mat with proceeds directly supporting household incomes. 3. Environmental stewardship and climate resilience. Fiber security and agroecology. Community managed fiber reserves to hedge against drought. Cooperatives built above-ground fiber silos. Elevated, ventilated racks storing 6 months' worth of processed stalks. This buffer ensured uninterrupted production during adverse seasons. Agroforestry partnerships. Collaborating with an environmental NGO, cooperatives planted 5 hectares of mixed groves, including mulberry, bamboo, and indigenous hardwoods along canal banks. These agroforestry zones supplied toolwood, stabilized banks to prevent erosion, and enhanced local biodiversity. B. Low-impact processing innovation. Thermal dye drying. Traditional sun-drying mats exposed them to dust and rain. Cooperatives piloted solar thermal drying sheds, curved, translucent polyethylene roofs capturing heat to quickly dry dyed mats in 2 to 3 hours. This reduced mold risk and fuel wood use for steam chambers. Water recycling systems. Dye workshop. Wastewater discharged into canals was treated through constructed wetlands planted with local reeds and water-hyacinth, removing dyes and reintroducing clean water into soaking pits, reducing freshwater demand by 40% for strategic partnerships and market expansion. Institutional collaborations. Fair and artisan alliances. River Roots achieved formal fair trade certification in 2011, unlocking access to European markets and guaranteeing minimum prices. Membership in the Southeast Asian Artisan Network facilitated bulk orders from museum shops and design boutiques across Asia and Australia. Design school engagements. Partnerships with design institutes in Penang and Bangkok led to annual Youth Weave Labs, where student designers co-created contemporary products blending traditional motifs with modern fashion and home decor sensibilities. Select prototypes entered cooperative production lines, attracting new urban customers. B. Digital and e-commerce scaling platform. Electrification. Upgrading from a basic website. Cooperatives invested in an integrated e-commerce platform, Riverroots, weave.org, featuring live inventory tracking, multi-currency checkout, and storytelling-driven product pages. Social media storytelling. A dedicated communications team launched Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube channels, sharing craft tutorials, day in the life weaver profiles, and environmental stewardship vignettes. By 2015, social media-driven sales accounted for 25% of total revenue. V. Emerging challenges and adaptive responses. A. Market saturation and pricing pressures. Erections risks. Rapid expansion saw product volumes outpace demand in low seasons, leading to storage cost burdens and discounted sales. The council instituted order caps and shifted to made-to-order production for certain lines, reducing overproduction and preserving premium pricing. Competition from copycats as cooperative branding gained visibility. Imitators produced inferior rice fiber mats, often cheap plastics under similar names. River Roots responded with a certified hand-woven tag featuring a QR code linking to production. Videos enabling buyers to verify authenticity. B. Climate anomalies and fiber supply. Extended drought spells. A 3-year drought 2013-2015 reduced rice yields by 20% regionally. Fiber silos provided a cushion, but cooperatives also collaborated with neighboring farming collectives to share stalk reserves and introduce drought-tolerant rice cultivars with strong stalks. Flood repairs. Floods in 2016 inundated soak pits. In response, cooperatives built modular, raised floor-soaked tanks and purchased portable salt-powered water pumps, ensuring fiber processing could resume quickly after floods. Vi unresolved thought. As you contemplate the remarkable journey of River Roots, hand-weaved from war-scarred beginnings to resilient cooperatives weaving economic, ecological, and cultural threads together, reflect on this question. Which elements of their success cooperative governance, sustainable resource management, strategic partnerships, or digital innovation are most transferable to other contexts? And how might they inform broader efforts to revive and sustain endangered artisanal traditions worldwide? You followed River Roots handweave cooperatives as they organized post-conflict villages into formal cooperatives, rebuilt infrastructure, scaled production with integrity, deepened socioeconomic impact, and forged strategic partnerships. Now, in this concluding chapter, we explore how these cooperatives are embedding their successes into enduring institutions, expanding their horizons through intercooperative networks and policy advocacy, and charting a future where rice fiber weaving continues to thrive amid evolving challenges. Through 4 key dimensions: governance consolidation, intergenerational continuity, sectoral integration, and replicable models, you'll see how a once fragmented craft has become a pulse of community resilience and a beacon for other heritage. REVIVALS, governance consolidation, embedding cooperative autonomy, legal recognition and policy engagement. National Cooperative Act registration in 2014. River Roots formalized its status under the Cambodian Cooperative Act, securing legal personality, tax incentives, and eligibility for government development grants. This registration cemented cooperative autonomy, enabling direct dialogue with provincial authorities on rural craft policies. Policy advisory roles: cooperative leaders now serve on the Ministry of Commerce's Handicraft Advisory Council, influencing standards for labeling, fair trade accreditation, and cultural heritage protections. Their lived experience informs regulatory reforms, such as simplified licensing for small craft exporters and buffer stock programs to stabilize rural incomes. Financial sustainability mechanisms, revolving loan funds beyond profit share allocations. Cooperatives established low-interest revolving loan funds, capitalized by a mix of microfinance partnerships and government seed capital. These funds offer members small working capital loans, accelerating raw material purchases in lean seasons and smoothing cash flow cycles without resorting to predatory lenders. Endowment and legacy funds. River Roots created a heritage endowment in 2016, funded by a portion of high-end tapestry sales and donor contributions are marked for long-term investments, cooperative property maintenance, next-generation master weaver fellowships, and emergency relief for climate or market shocks. 2. Intergenerational continuity, from apprenticeship to leadership. Structured training, pathways, certified weaver, curriculum in collaboration with the Ministry of Education. Cooperatives co-designed a certified weaver curriculum integrated into local vocational schools. Students complete 400 hours of hands-on training spanning fiber science, pattern geometry, and business skills, earning recognized certificates that translate into guaranteed cooperative apprenticeships. Master Weaver Fellowships Year. 2 exceptional young weavers are awarded year-long fellowships, stipends supporting full-time study under master weavers, travel to other cooperative sites, and participation in international craft residencies. Fellows return with advanced skills and fresh perspectives, strengthening intergenerational BONDSB mentorship and leadership. Pipelines Council Succession Planning. The Cooperatives Council of 5 now operates under formal succession guidelines. Outgoing members mentor incoming candidates over a 6-month transition, ensuring policy continuity and leadership capacity building. Youth advisory boards to keep youth voices central. Each cooperative chapter hosts a youth advisory board, aged 18 to 30, who propose new product lines, digital campaigns, and educational outreach. Their insights have driven River Roots Essentials and online weave-along platforms, marrying tradition with modern engagement. Sectoral integration. Weaving across a mosaic, linking agriculture, tourism, and craft to grow craft clusters. Roots pioneered an agro-craft cluster model. Weaving cooperatives partner with rice farming collectives, ecolodge operators, and local fisheries to create integrated rural value chains. Tourists experience farm tours, weaving workshops, and river safaris in unified packages, spreading economic benefits across sectors. Development. Working with provincial governments, cooperatives helped map and brand the Mekong Heritage Corridor, a network of weaving villages, historical sites, and ecotourism nodes. Signage, guidebooks, and joint marketing campaigns promote multi-day itineraries, extending visitor stays and increasing per capita tourism revenue for participating communities. B. Research, partnerships and innovation labs. Textile science collaboration. Roots collaborates with the Royal University's Textile Technology Institute to research improved natural dyes, advanced fiber treatments, and sustainable tool materials, ensuring craft evolution is science-informed and ecologically sound. Design, innovation labs. Periodic design innovation labs, held in partnership with regional design schools, convene weavers, designers, and entrepreneurs to co-create new product prototypes ranging from architectural panels to wearable tech, accessories, keeping rice fiber weaving relevant in the 21st century creative economy. IV. Replicable models. From river routes to global revival, documenting best practices. Panzer's Cooperative Toolkit. River Routes published a comprehensive cooperative hand-weave toolkit covering charter templates, quality control protocols, youth engagement models, and market development case studies under a Creative Commons license. This digital resource, downloaded by craft promoters in over 15 countries, has become a foundational guide for heritage revivals from Latin America to West Africa. Peer-to-peer learning exchanges. The cooperative hosts annual peer-to-peer learning exchanges, inviting delegations from other endangered craft regions such as Himalayan carpet weavers and Andean textile cooperatives to share challenges and innovations. These dialogues foster a global solidarity network and cultural adaptation of successful strategies. B. Future horizons and adaptive capacity. Climate Smart Crafting. River Routes is piloting next-generation climate-smart crafting initiatives, exploring drought-resistant rice varieties with robust stalks, solar borehole-powered dye baths, and bio-based resin treatments to improve fiber longevity, anticipating and mitigating climate impacts on craft. Ecologies.digital. Heritage integration plans are underway to integrate cooperative oral histories, motif archives, and weaving tutorials into a VR living weave museum, accessible globally via mobile headsets, ensuring cultural memory thrives in digital realms alongside physical craft communities. V. Enduring lessons and reflective challenge. The decade-long journey of river routes, hand-weave from fragmented post-war recovery to a globally influential cooperative network, illuminates four enduring principles. Holistic governance. Embedding craft cooperatives within legal, financial, and policy frameworks ensures autonomy and resilience. Intergenerational stewardship. Structured training, mentorship, and youth leadership pipelines safeguard knowledge transmission and adapt craft to new generations. Sectoral synergy. Integrating craft with agriculture, tourism, and research fosters diversified rural economies and shared prosperity. Global solidarity. Open source toolkits and peer networks enable replicable, context-responsive revival models across the world. Reflective question. As you witness how a shattered craft tradition was reimagined through cooperative vision, strategic partnerships, and adaptive innovation, consider which of these principles might you apply to support and sustain endangered crafts and cultural practices in your own community, ensuring that heritage not only survives but flourishes in a changing world.